Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, March 2nd meeting of the Lincoln City Council. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of the business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and then those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. The testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meeting of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on an issue not on the agenda for that date, nor plan for a future agenda. And Teresa, can you please call the first item of business?
We ask those of the general public coming forward to testify to please clearly state your name, spell your name, give your address, and sign in on the sign-in sheet lying on the podium. Testifiers may use either microphone, and there is a sign-in sheet by each microphone. We ask those individuals from city staff who are testifying to please state your name, title, and the department you work for. Our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on these items? Seeing none.
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Items 1A through C were introduced by Christensen.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Christensen, seconded by Ward. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 2A was introduced by Shob.
So moved. Second.
Introduced by Shob, seconded by Christensen. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Next then, we have our public hearing resolutions. Item 4A is accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for February 1st through the 15th, 2020.
Is there anyone in the audience that wanted to address a claim? Seeing none, we can go on.
All right, we'll go on to item 4B, approving a multi-year development and marketing agreement between the city and Blue Source Energy to provide renewable natural gas offtake services required to demonstrate transportation fuel use and generate, market, and monetize renewable identification numbers and low-carbon fuel standard credits.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Donna Garden. I'm the Assistant Director of Utilities for Lincoln Transportation and Utilities. And I'm here today to speak about this contract. It's kind of an unusual contract, so I wanted to make sure we were clear on what it was. A little background first. The Teresa Street Water Resource Recovery Facility Biogas to Vehicle Fuel Project was approved during the last budget cycle. And it was approved to utilize biogas or renewable natural gas that is produced here every day. The project replaces our electrical generation facilities that have reached the end of their life. We will be cleaning and compressing the gas for injection into the Black Hills Energy natural gas pipeline system. There it can be utilized as vehicle fuel here or wherever the system provides natural gas. This is a sustainable, non-fossil fuel generation of gas. The contract with Blue Source Energy captures both the economic value of the renewable natural gas and the environmental attributes associated with that gas. That includes renewable identification numbers. These are according to the Federal Renewable Fuel Standard Program and Low Carbon Fuel Standard and Clean Fuels Program, and other potential carbon offsets. Through this contract, Blue Source will provide 2 key activities. First, they will act as the renewable natural gas transportation offtake provider for storage and sale of the gas, and for marketing and monetizing the green attributes of the RNG. Second, they will provide all services associated with registration of our facility through EPA and provide all reporting and record-keeping necessary. Blue Source LLC was selected utilizing the city's RFQ process. 5 different energy management companies submitted proposals, and ultimately 2 were interviewed. Blue Source provided an excellent proposal to the city, and with the city receiving 100% of the gas sales and 70 to 88% of the green attribute sales. Based on current pricing, that would increase wastewater enterprise fund revenues by $2 million per year. This contract is a multi-year contract, 4-year with an option to renew for another 4 years. Because construction of our biogas project at Teresa Street will be complete in June, we are asking your approval of this now so that Blue Source can complete the registration of this project with EPA and be ready to sell RNG as soon as it is available for the pipeline. We have a long history of recovering valuable resources at our wastewater facilities, and long history of recovering resources that are flushed down the toilet every day. We are proud to embark upon this new chapter of providing vehicle fuel for the renewable natural gas we produce every day, day in, day out. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Roy.
So, once upon a time, we were talking about including a vehicle fill station at Teresa Street. Is that still part of this?
There is not part of this, no. Once it gets into the pipeline, though, it's available to any fuel station that has natural gas in it.
Donna, could you go over the costs per year? You mentioned that we're going to be saving $2 million per year, but what are some of the terms of the contract? What is the fee that we're paying Blue Source Energy?
We actually pay no fee to Blue Source Energy. They actually take a part of those revenues that are coming into us from the sale of the gas and from the sale of the RINs. I should say just from the sale of the RINs, because we get 100% of the gas sales.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions for Donna? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we can move on.
All right, we'll go on to item 4C, Special Permit 450R, application of Madonna Centers to allow for a new building at an existing non-residential healthcare facility with a waiver to increase building height on property generally located at 5401 South Street.
Your pen didn't work.
We know who you are. Who are you?
Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900 here in Lincoln. Appearing before you today on behalf of Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital. With me today is Mike Monroe, who's General Counsel of Madonna, Daniel Grice, who's the Vice President of Facilities, and we also have Nate Buss, engineer with Olson, project engineer, and Darren Horst from the architecture firm. What we're in front of you for is an amendment to the special permit that governs the operation of Madonna as a non-residential healthcare facility under our zoning code. The campus is generally located at 56th and South Street. The elevation that we have on the overhead shows the expansion that is being proposed. It's approximately a 48,000 square foot facility with an investment of approximately $57 million into the campus. The expansion really has 3 primary components. There will be a new entryway and lobby area on the east side of the building, a new 3-story tower consisting of patient rooms, again on the east side of the building, and the access points onto both South Street and South 56th Streets as entryways to the campus will be reconfigured, as will the internal traffic flow within the campus. I do emphasize that the expansion does not increase the bed count for Madonna. It'll stay static at 120 beds. The former patient rooms that were in the existing facility will be repurposed for other administrative and other rehab uses. This item was before the Planning Commission last month. Planning Commission recommended approval of the special permit amendment on a 7-0 vote, including 3 waivers dealing with height and front yard requirements. The other thing I did want to emphasize, the parking requirements for the Madonna campus is approximately 600 stalls. The site plan reflects 965 stalls. We're about 160% of what is required under the zoning code, but it's really based upon the true demand of patients and families and staff and the healthcare workers. The schedule that the expansion will take is anticipated that construction will start in April next month, and it's about a 3-year-long process for the full implementation of the plan, and so completion would be occurring in the spring of 2023. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. The other thing I would just add is that the configuration of the entryways is really going to improve. You may be aware that there's 2 entryways on South Street. They'll be consolidated into one, but really make a focal point as an entryway to the campus. And then the exit or the access off of 56th Street will be moved a little bit to the south and then converted to just right in, right out to help ease that traffic congestion there too. So I think it's a good plan for everybody. Works well for the city, and it's a great expansion for the Madonna campus.
Yes, Sandra.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Council Chair. I have a question about the image, the rendering that you have of
Sure.
the building. Can you tell first, what direction are we looking? Are we looking west?
Yeah, this is primarily from the north looking to the south.
Looking south.
Probably at about South Street.
Facing east.
This area right in here is the new entryway with the new tower. You can kind of see on the site plan too that the new portion of the building is really located, here's the entryway with the new tower to the south. So that's what we're talking about here, the new entryway and lobby area with the tower to the south, primarily looking to the south.
Okay. Could you explain why you need the height waiver and where on the map is the highest part of the building?
To be honest, we probably don't need the height waiver, but we asked for it anyway. The height in this area is a 35-foot height limitation, and with the 3 stories, that really fits within it. We included it for just any the architectural additions, whether it's a parapet or other amenities on the roof, but I think that we otherwise could comply with it. The primary waivers, we're trying to preserve parking stalls along South Street and then provide for the circulation. We asked for a waiver of the front yard on the South Street on the Glade Street side to allow the drive there to have full access for emergency vehicles and deliveries, et cetera.
Yeah.
But so the height issue is not a big issue.
Okay, I wasn't concerned with any of the other waivers, but I am kind of sensitive to height waivers in neighborhoods, and so I wanted to understand where it was, and if you're not going to use it, will the waiver ride, will that special use ride with Madonna forever? Or can the
Yeah.
city pull that back?
Well,
so
but
that-
based on this site plan, I mean, the campus itself will be governed by the site plan, and so no improvements can occur contrary to the site plan. So if there's another expansion in 20 years, it would have to come back to this body for further approval.
Roy.
So are we going vertical for the most part, or are we adding footprint?
Adding footprint, the new portion of the footprint is really found at this entryway, and this is all new footprint here in the southern portion. The primary focus is on improved patient care, and it's addition of private rooms primarily, and the elimination of all the shared rooms that were existing in the existing facility that are going to be repurposed, as I mentioned.
Tom, could you tell us a little bit more? You know, Madonna has a wonderful reputation of housing long-term care individuals, a lot of rehab patients. So what patient mix will be in the towers, the 3 floors? Are they talking, and they also do pediatric rehab?
Well, I think that the new patient care rooms will be all of their population for, they're there for rehab purposes. And it's primarily focused on better amenities within the patient rooms to provide better service to those patients. But I think all of the patients that are there for, I guess, short-term rehab is really what it is. They do have some long-term rehab too, but that care is also will be continued in the new facility.
So that new 3-story tower is not a new wing devoted to a specific type of patient? Okay.
No, correct. I think it's across the board based upon their existing patient load,
Okay.
patient population.
Thank you. Is there any more questions for Mr. Houston?
I have a statement to make. Having been in there quite a bit as a professional, I can tell this is important because it consolidates where the patients are rather than spread out all over the facility, which seemed to be quite of a sprawl. But this will help in patient care significantly by bringing the patients all together in that one area.
Correct. A 48,000 square foot addition. This is a large addition, but you're right, it is the consolidation of all the patient rooms at one primary location.
Terrific. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we can move on.
Okay, we'll go on to item 4D, use permit 15E, application of JDM Learning LLC to allow for an early childhood care facility for up to 266 children and 25 staff on property generally located at South 27th Street and Old Cheney Road.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and Council members. My name is Brad Marshall with Olson, 601 P Street, Suite 200. I'm here on behalf of JDM Learning LLC, doing business as Kids Are Kids LLC. Here for an amendment to use permit that would allow early child care facilities in the O3 use. There is a ask for an increase for the square footage from 14,400 to 16,500 and a capacity of 266 children and another 25 employees that would be, again, at the maximum threshold. The property is located near 27th and Old Cheney, and part of the complex there that has several existing businesses. This is actually the last lot to develop in the development. And so traffic has been a big discussion as I went through Planning Commission. There's a lot of discussion about this and how this facility with its size and increase would actually operate. First, we are not asking for an increase in the overall size of the use permit. There was unused and allocated square footage within the development that is being able to move over to this proposal. Parking will be added for the new facility on, this is lot 4 where it would be located. There are 5 points of entry that I've tried to highlight here from the west, south, and east. There are full accesses here. There are 2 out to the adjacent neighborhoods and then a full access out to Old Cheney as well. The pink, if you can see the colors, the pink parking will be added parking to the development. And then the orange colored here to the south of this particular lot will be it's built parking that is underutilized right now with anticipation of these this lot developing someday. The lot actually slopes from higher ground from east to west. It will kind of be a walkout building on the west side. We anticipate most of the entrants to come and park on the west side because that's where the main entry will be. And so that's where most of the parents will be coming to drop off the children. There's no requirement for stacking, there's no requirement for drop-offs, but we are providing a drop-off up to the front door, which there will be about 6 stalls, or enough room for those to be filtered through. There won't be dedicated parking there, but parents may drive up to the front door and drop off their children. This overall use permit also has shared and access drives that are common access. When the development was created, there was parking that would be distributed between 4, 5, 6, and 7. So these lots to the north and northeast and east, lots 1, 2, and 3, are isolated lots and they provide their own parking. And so this new facility would not be utilizing any of that parking on those lots at all. So it would just be shared parking on the other ones. I want to point out that this isn't like a school situation, like an elementary, where you have a 15-minute window to drop off your children and have hundreds of kids coming in all at one time. The facility will open at 6:30 in the morning, and a majority of their drop-offs are between 6:30 and 9 a.m. By our account, about half of the businesses open after 8 a.m. in this business area. And so most of those children, the peak time for Kids Are Kids is before 8 a.m. And data provided by the client shows that the maximum number of children in a 15-minute period is about 20 vehicles. And it is only decreased from those periods of time. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
I guess I have one comment. Though the you don't have a requirement for drop-off lanes and the such, to the degree that you can move forward with the 6 spaces or more, I remember the drop-off days, and it was kind of crazy. And 266 is a lot of parents dropping kids off.
Yeah, I should add, there are stalls are on the west side. If that drop-off lane is full, there are places for parents to come and park and walk their children up to the building in that manner. They also have, I should have mentioned, they do have an after-school program as well. And so you won't see the majority, there's about 50 children that attend that, kind of on average. And so you won't see those additional trips in the morning, where those kids will actually probably be bussed in the afternoons.
Could you go over some of the parking stalls? How many parking stalls are on, would that be the east side? The pink?
Yep. I believe there's about 18 stalls that will be added there. These eastern stalls and southern stalls are really good locations for employees to park. Like I said, the east side is going to be higher in elevation, so it'll be a little bit more difficult for parents to park over here and walk around the facility and down to the front of the building. The majority of those will be, I'm assuming, will want to be at the front door, near the front door when drop-off is happening.
And then, so how many parking stalls are on the other side?
On the west side here?
Yep.
I think it's just about the same. There's 16 or so on the west. So 16 plus another 6 in front of the building, 22 stalls. So it would be on the west side where the entrance is. And like I said, there, by our account, or the information provided by the applicant, is that no more than 20 vehicles are coming in a 15-minute period. So we tried to cover that.
Any other questions from up here? Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we can move on.
Okay, we'll go on to item 4E, approving amendment number 2 to the conditional annexation and zoning agreement for South 84th and Highway 2 between the city, Andermatt LLC, and Iger Corporation, delete Article 6, Section B, trips and square footage, and amend Article 10, future costs, responsibilities of the annexation agreement.
Good afternoon, members of the council. Danae Kalkowski appearing today on behalf of Iger Corp., who was the developer of the shopping center out at 84th and Highway 2. I'm going to start with the map and just a little bit of history, because I think it gives us the roadmap for why we're before you today. But in November of 2001, the City Council approved the conditional annexation for and zoning agreement for 84th and Highway 2. So as part of that annexation agreement, we master planned the sewer, water, roads for the entire development, basically extending all the way from 84th over to 98th Pine Lake Road down to south of Highway 2. So there was a large area that was master planned. A huge part of that annexation agreement was road improvements. You know, at the time, we didn't have the relocation of 84th Street. Pine Lake Road location hadn't been adjusted, gravel, asphalt, no 91st Street at all. So there were some pretty significant road improvements that were needed in order to accommodate the large development that was anticipated out here. The road improvement requirements in the annexation agreement were based upon multiple traffic studies that were done prior to approval. Those were completed by the developer, reviewed by the city, and they basically tried to forecast what the anticipated uses for this site would be and identify traffic counts to be associated with those uses. There was a specific methodology used in the traffic study. They utilized that sixth generation of the ITE, the engineer, or let me make sure I get that, Institute of Transportation Engineer manual for determining the category of use and then the PM peak hour trip rate that would be generated by those uses. So if you took the square footage times the rate for the use, you'd come up with the trips that would be utilized. City and developer in the annexation agreed that the street improvements that were listed in the annexation agreement would accommodate 5,283 net PM peak hour trips. They were net because there's some discounts given for traffic that stays within the development, et cetera. 4,044 of those trips were allocated to the north side of Highway 2, and 1,239 were allocated to the south side of Highway 2. Really, at the time, the purpose of that trip cap was to protect the city. If traffic generated by the development that occurred out there exceeded those trip numbers, then the city would have the right to require the developer to do additional road improvements. As you can imagine at the time, this was 20 years ago, this was a huge amount of land with some unknowns on really how it might actually develop in the future. So I think historically the city has just utilized square footage for looking at these types of developments. But I think in this instance, they felt because you could have big box users, some other users, that traffic or trips was a better methodology to use to sort of keep track of what was going on out there and the impact. And to my knowledge, this is the only one I'm aware of in the entire city that uses trips, or it calculates based upon trips or trip cap. As a result of that trip cap in the annexation agreement, use and trip tables were added to the use permit and special permits for both the north and south side of the highway. And those trip tables identify the specific uses for each lot within the development, the amount of square footage, the trip rate, and then they calculate at the end the trips generated by that use with a cumulative total at the bottom. Over time, as you might imagine, the tracking of trips has become somewhat burdensome. There have been numerous administrative amendments. I think Abby mentioned 19, or we're getting close to 20 administrative amendments to both the use permits and the special permits. And they're required anytime you make an adjustment on the site, whether you're just increasing the square footage, whether the property is sold and you're changing the use. So anytime something needs to be done, an administrative amendment is required. That hadn't necessarily been a problem until recently. We have had a situation where we've had one of those administrative amendments that was approved before the end of the year. It's been appealed to the Planning Commission, appealed to the City Council, so we're in March and we still are now able to allow that user to go forward and get his building permit. So we had been in discussion with Planning and LTU for probably over a year about these trip tables and that they were becoming somewhat burdensome. And so we didn't really have a reason to come before with a formal amendment until what's happened really with the appeal. It's kind of lit the fire and said, okay, we need to get this taken care of because it's becoming problematic. Developer and the city staff basically agreed to request the removal of the trip cap from the annexation agreement. And we have really several reasons why we think that's appropriate at this time. Number one, all of the developer infrastructure obligations have been completed out here, road, water, sewer, and in fact, in 2014, we did a release and satisfaction agreement with the city acknowledging that that had happened. There's been a lot of development that's occurred over this 20-year period. In essence, what we've ended up with a mix of uses out here, so not fully just saturated with commercial, high-intensity traffic uses. And so some of the property that may have been anticipated to be a little more traffic intense is not necessarily developed that way. The trips that are allocated on those charts show that we have an excess of trips that are underutilized. So I believe that city staff is comfortable that even with the final development out here of vacant lots, we're never going to reach the amount of trips that were listed in that trip cap. In fact, on the north side, of the 4,000 trips that are permitted, even allocating trips to the undeveloped parcels, we're at 3,400. So we have 600 plus additional trips that are unutilized. On the south side, out of the 1,239 trips, only about half of those, 636, are allocated for the entire site. So we've barely used half of the trips that would be available down there. So there'd really be no set of circumstances where you would have uses change down there that would exceed that trip cap. And then finally, removing the trip cap from the annexation agreement, and then subsequently these tables from the use permit will streamline the development process out here. It will eliminate the need for all of these administrative amendments every time somebody wants to change the use or change the square footage. And I think it also would eliminate the opportunity for there being discrepancy among what category we should be using for today's uses based upon, an ITE manual that was done in the late 90s. So I think in conclusion, I think because there's no longer a need really to protect the city with the trip cap that's in the annexation agreement, and its removal will make the development process more efficient. We're asking for your approval of this amendment to the use permit that would remove that trip cap. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Okay, please come forward.
And I do have a few handouts. Is that okay?
Sure. And please do identify yourself.
My name is David Fiala with the FAA Properties, which has a and we have a property out at this location, and we've had some requests that have went on for years, and I'm gonna, I guess I'm not on TV very often, so I guess I'd like to say happy birthday to my brother who's serving our country's military overseas today.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I wasn't aware this was going to come up in front of City Council until just last week, so maybe I'm not as prepared as I could be to bring this forward. But to me, the true story and the real story that why this has come up now is because for multiple years after purchasing ground in 2015 and asking for proof and support for these trip calculations, it just wasn't provided to us. And I've been following our bylaws and our covenants, and then I went to the state law, which Nebraska Revocable Statute 21-19166 provides all owners and members in these nonprofit associations the ability to receive all the information for the association to audit when they believe there's an issue. One of the red flags that I found when I asked for the information was, I'll get it to you, and then they don't. And then council becomes involved for a fiduciary for our association, and I get told to go look it up myself and hung up on. Those are just some of the red flags that appeared that was quite a concern. Another large concern for a small association, which I have ownership in other residential ones, about 7 I've been involved in real estate investments for 20 years, but not commercial. But usually those are very easy to understand, fully disclosed on what the expenses are and where they go. Well, I didn't find that here. And one of the things is usually your dues might be $300 a year, maybe $5,000 a year, $1,000 a year. Here, we got a bill for $33,000 a year. And we're like, look, you're asking for all this money, which we had paid in good faith over $50,000, and say we're paying in protest because you can't prove this is due. Two things, the expenses themselves and this cost share with the PM trips. You can't prove it to me. And one of the things that occurred that I was missing was this 6th edition ITE book. The city didn't have it, which I'm still surprised why it would get thrown away, because I'm sure the city had it over the years, but the engineer nor the developer or the association could provide it to me. Again, a red flag. So I finally, in December, after struggling with this for years and getting blowback for asking for this information, which I have the right to, I find the book, and I'm a little shocked. I get in the book and I find about 80% of the calculations are wrong, and most especially for us. And they were wrong in terms of an ITE number, which was 1.28 in the book, was represented on a 2005 use permit as 3.53. This is used for us to pay more dues and be unfairly treated by the developer or others. As I looked further into the book, and as I found a very confusing city website, which there's a lot of things there, but whether you go through a link that's this long instead of this long to find that information, well, what I find is I go back to 2005, and when I found the original trip table, there had a calculation for the developer's business, the Corp gas station out there, for a calculation with the number of pumps. That's how it's done. I've talked to several engineers in the city to vet through on my auditing. And I am a financial analyst and an economist, by the way, so I do these sort of things. And what I found was there was an amendment put in, signed by Calvin Corver in 2005, to change his pump from 20 to 16. 25% reduction, which turns out to be for their dues for less 15 years. So I went through this, and I'll get to some of these handouts, but so I went through this along with the vetting of the costs. One of the items I found with the costs, just talk about one thing, mowing. One thing I found in my audit was there was a business out there that had faced legal litigation and different harassment from 2010 to 2014, and then there was a trial. Well, during this trial, there was testimony, so I got that testimony. And I found that Mr. Corver testified that the value for the mowing, 1 year was annual mowing, small association, $7,600 1 year, $5,600 another year. I thought, that seems really reasonable. That's actually what I expected before I knew that information. And I would appreciate it if I could have a little more time. I mean, it just is.
Yeah, right now, that's the 1 minute warning.
Oh, okay.
1 minute.
1 minute warning.
So, that's what he testified to. In 2017, for managing the mowing and mowing, he charged and paid himself $42,000. So 6 times what something's worth. And I found those examples in the expenses to where this is embezzlement. And I'll go through, like I said, I probably would need a lot more time to present what I have, but I think these handouts speak for themselves if you take time to go through them. Where I actually put forth an amendment, or excuse me, a proposed amendment and then amendment in January, but in December, with the appeal of a case of an item we're going to hear later, I provided all the correct data from the book, copies of the pages of the book, along with the table that corrected what was wrong. So that's what has spurred on this, all of a sudden, hurry up to take this table off. And I really don't have any opposition to taking this off the table long term. It really doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose other than this malfeasance, so to speak, and attention towards it. And so one of the things I would ask is that this is something that just gets voted on to postpone it for a specific period of time, whether that be a month or 2 months from now, to where maybe I can spend some time with some of you or others with the city to bring more attention to this matter. So the handouts, I'm putting forth some state statutes, which I have reported what I've found in my findings in my audit, to Lincoln Police Department, and I've had difficulty with that actually being investigated, calling it a civil matter and not the reality of what it is, which any theft by deception or extortion scenario is going to be a civil matter because finances had to occur. This is the nuts and bolts of my audit on the third page with some color to it. It actually shows the miscalculations and what it meant to over time for the last 4 years. Going back to showing a letter, I would like to request just a little more time.
We can give you 1 more minute, and I'd really like you to address the specifics, how this impacts the annexation agreement before us today.
In terms of it, as I just said, I don't believe in terms of the annexation agreement. There was an item in 2014 that was brought forth at this other city planning commission meeting that I hadn't seen before. That dismissed it from 2014. So I think there's an argument that shouldn't have been around since 2014. So I'm here bringing attention to this matter, and as soon as I get the facts that I was not getting for a number of years, now we want to get rid of it. So I'm bringing attention to the malfeasance around it. In terms of the proposal that I made after talking to the city was, and with my amendment that I made in January that was denied, was let's just bring this to the table, let's correct it, and then take it off the table. And you bring it to the associations, and we'll deal with it then. But the city's been involved with this, approving this, and as I've understood it, they basically have said, just sign off on it. You know, and one of the letters dated October 20th, 2015, this was something for my property. I wasn't copied on it. I never got a copy of it. And I was asking for it for 4 years until I got some of this information last year. So.
Thank you, Mr. Fiala. Yes,
Ms. Ward, let's go first.
Any questions?
May I ask, Madam
Yes.
Chair?
absolutely.
Yes, so just so I understand, Mr. Fiala, if we were to approve the annexation today, you said that, except for wanting more time, that's something you could live with. So your appeal is actually on first reading, so that would give you some time to talk to, we have talked, so that would give you time to talk to my colleagues. If in fact we did, it would not affect, from your point of view, your appeal item, which is 6J. Is that fair to, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying today.
But what occurred is I found another approval that occurred in December, which I strongly disagree with that intended use, which I'll explain later because I think I'll have a chance to speak then. That intended use, I said I agree with.
Okay.
What was wrong is they had the intended use, which I think was accurate, was changed on the trip table and was a different calculation on the trip table. So it was just more questions with this trip table calculations versus just what the actual use is. And, you know, the city planning approved the use and then they changed it. So the use has been approved. I've been clear for the actual use. This is what this business does. This is what it's called, and what it should be based on this book. I approve that. So what the business is, we approve it. We don't have any question with that. It's just simply because these calculations mean something, and there's been a history for 15 years of manipulation where my audit. So I'm going to appeal my amendment, which got turned down, which is what this is, saying I need to have notice from other people, even though I showed that I provided notice to everybody within this.
Right.
And I'm just showing a discrepancy on terms of the one additional item, which it's within here, but there's, Iger isn't the authorized individual to put forth this motion
But in
with our
theory,
association.
right. So in theory, you also agree getting rid of the trip tables is a good thing for us to do in the city, if we do this.
I think it's a good thing to address what happened,
Sure.
and then a proper party make
Okay.
a proper party, which Iger is not the proper party right now, because this is an association, have a proper party make the motion, because I don't think they're actually the authorized entity to make that motion right now. And I'm trying to show a discrepancy on, here, we're gonna allow this, but when it comes to my rights, I don't even get a notice when they change my property, and secondly, I'm told I need things that they don't need from me. So, I don't think they're authorized to even put the motion in, or put this in at this time. It should be an association motion.
Thank you.
So,
All right,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Councilman Shob had a.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Fiala, you got, before
Fiala?
you leave, I have a question. Thank you for coming back. Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilwoman Ward. Mr. Fiala, I'm having trouble connecting the dots. It sounds like you feel the trip table in the past was used to charge you more money as an association member? Am I missing that? And you feel like...
Well, I wouldn't put it in that capacity. I would say it wasn't done correctly. If it was done correctly, it would have been fair. But yes.
Okay, and we're here today to annex property and remove the trip table. It's not like you have a contract with somebody, and I'm not sure if we're the right body to be... I'm gonna make sure I get the facts from you, and then later on I'll ask the city attorney to help me better understand this, but I'm not sure that's what we're charged here to do today. If we're able to help you look at your charging from your contract with your association. Am I missing that a lot?
That's my question as well, because I don't see alleged malfeasance as any part of council business or a zoning issue. And that's not what's in front of us.
Right. And I understand, I'm saying I'm using this as an opportunity to bring that to your attention, because I think holding our city government accountable and what's going on from city planning to the city police, to the mayor's office, to the city attorney's office is important. In terms of who's authorized to put this motion forward, on one hand, I'm saying, I'm being told I need something else as a business owner out there. Well, now another business owner who was a developer who's gave up their rights to this association, they now want to make this go away and not talk about it anymore after somebody actually audited it and brought this to light and said, this isn't right. So within,
But I guess
this is just on there's minutes from 2008 where this was no longer, the contract's with the association and the city is where I'm coming from, not the developer, to make this.
Thank you, Mr. Fiallo. I think we're going to ask for staff questions next.
This is your due process. I do appreciate you embracing that.
Mr. Hendrickson, do you want to come up and answer just a few questions we might have of you?
Help.
Steve Hendrickson, Development Review Manager for the Planning Department.
Would you like to clarify what's before us today that we will be making decisions on?
Sure. Today is an amendment to the original annexation agreement to delete what was in that agreement that said basically there's a cap on this entire development, both the north side and the south side, 5,283 trips. And so that cap was set in the annexation agreement, but then it was tracked over time through, there's a use permit on the north side of Highway 2 and a separate use permit and special permit on the south side. And so over time we tracked trips to make sure, are you staying below that 5,000 overall? And it was split 4,000 on the north approximately and about 1,200 on the south. So over time it became quite clear that as it was starting to fill up this, that particularly here on the south side, the cap was 1,293. This trip table was at 660. And somebody would come in and because they had to get the use correct, because they had very specific uses that were listed, such as fast food restaurant or commercial or gas station or office. But if that use was not going to be an office, it was now going to be a retail building. You had to change the trip table to reflect if that was somehow a dramatic change. But it never was a dramatic change. It always was hovering somewhere around 600 trips, or nearly 50% less than what they were allowed. And so a number of years, way before this, it became clear as we were doing amendment after amendment after amendment to do minor little changes that there really wasn't much point to this trip table anymore because we were so far below that cap. And just to give you an idea of 1,280 trips, Walmart alone, these are trips in a PM peak hour, is 532. So if they suddenly in one of these little pad sites of an acre were able to drop a Walmart in, then perhaps it might have suddenly burst up to the 1,200. But that's not going to happen. These sites are too small on the south side. So anyhow, we talked to the developer about deleting it. It never got around to be deleted, and then it became clear, as this most recent appeal has shown, the appeal is before you next week. When an owner came in, he was simply trying to correct the table so that he had the correct use, and now it's been tied up in all of this appeals and everything else that has completely unrelated concern. And that is a concern about charges and everything else, and trying to really get into the micro details of this trip table that we don't think is valid or worthwhile anymore. Rather, there is 17 trips on this one lot or 19 trips on this one lot. it doesn't matter because they are over 600 trips below their cap. And so the first step in this process is, since the cap is called for in the annexation agreement, is to delete it out of the annexation agreement, because that's kind of the higher level here. Is it's in the annexation agreement. City Council 20-plus years ago said, hey, let's track these trips. If we get it out of the agreement, then we can also then delete it out of these use permits, special permits.
So Steve, isn't customary when there is a large development of this nature, you do a traffic study count? That seems to always be included in any type of development, but it seems highly unusual that it would continue to be part of that development agreement going forward. Once you have established the traffic count, you know that this is the volume of roads that need to be built to handle that traffic count. And it seems like the city just moves on because they've met that obligation based on the engineering studies. And it seems highly unusual that we still have to deal with this.
Yes,
issue.
And this is a good example of why we think that it should just be simply deleted, because it no longer serves a purpose. For instance, Horizon Business Center at 14th and Pine Lake Road, west of 14th Street, south of Southwest High School. That had a very intricate table that went along with it. Village Gardens at 56th and Pine Lake Road, it had a table. But as the building started to develop out, and it was clear it was going to be well below its cap, suddenly at Village Gardens, it didn't suddenly have a Walmart drop there that would have dramatically changed the trips and perhaps made turn lanes need to be longer. We got rid of those very specific land use tables. And so that's what we've been advocating for some time to do here, is rather than continuing to make little changes that don't add up to anything worthwhile, is to simply delete the table.
And it seems like the issue about what the property management team has been doing or the landowners have been doing with that trip table, trip chart, is totally irrelevant to us. It's the private transaction that they have with those entities that lease that property. It's a private transaction and a discussion between them, because...
Yes, we agree, and we're not aware of anyone else who's come forward to say, oh, but our maintenance charges are tied to your trip table. I think this is unique in that regard, and again, that's why we, one, for our own purposes, we don't see the need for it, but two, because it has become tangled up in this other part of it, we think it's better that that's just handled privately, how they handle their maintenance charges, and not tie it to a table that we think is not relevant. It really takes up a lot of time of both the city staff, and has now delayed a building permit for 3 months because of all the intricacies and concerns about very small details in the trip table.
Thank you. Benny?
I already had one bite.
I have one question. Steve, can you tell me, are there any other areas in the city of Lincoln where we're tracking trips like this?
I think we still have a couple of other trip tables that are in applications. Certainly this process has shown we need to find a way perhaps of better doing that. But they're particularly on a new center where there's a pretty significant traffic impact. Sometimes the trips is a concern. This type of a level of detail of a table, we don't have a lot of these.
Okay.
Benny?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was, with this resolution, this parcel of property and the trip table won't be a problem in the future?
Yeah, this is the first step, which is to remove it from the annexation agreement. The Planning Commission has on their agenda on Wednesday, 2 days from now, to remove the trip tables from the actual use permit and special permit on the south side of Highway 2. The developer on the north side, Iger Corp., is making some minor changes up there, and they intend to remove the trip table when they come forward with that application on the north side as well. So we're on Wednesday getting rid of it. Planning Commission, that's what's before them. And then in the future, hopefully soon, we would be another proposal deleted on the north side.
There's some concern that this action is getting rid of it and, for lack of a better phrase, destroying the evidence so there can be no recall. I, as an attorney, do you feel that's true, that what's happened in the past gets erased if we do this today?
Well, I'm a city planner, not an
As a city planner, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Right here on our website are all of our admin amendments. They're all listed there. We don't get rid of them. Even if, when somebody submits something and it's withdrawn, it's still there. If they submit something and it's denied, it's still there. We try to keep a record of all of the information that is on there, and we keep it on the site for decades to come. So we have things going back to the 60s and 70s for parking lots that have long since been replaced by a building, but our application is still there because we think it's important to keep track of those records.
Thank you. Sorry about the attorney planner thing. I don't know if that was a compliment or an insult.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other staff questions? Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, I think, yes, Ms. Kurkowski, yes, please.
Well, I think Steve's done a good job of explaining. We really have two things going on here. The private association matter has really absolutely nothing to do with the action before you today. And there are specific private agreements. As each property was sold, there was a shopping center rider sign for each individual sale that lists trips. So aside from this table, there's other methods of calculating trips and dealing with private agreements between the parties out there. This really doesn't have anything to do with it. And so I think it's timely. It's become more of a problem than it has a benefit, and I think the use and the need for it is, no longer exists. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for me.
I think we're good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. We can move on.
All right, that concludes the public hearing portion. We can vote on these resolutions. Item 4A is the report of due and pending claims for the period of February 1st through the 15th, introduced by Christensen.
So moved?
Second.
Introduced by Christensen, seconded by Washington. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Item 4B is the multi-year development and marketing agreement with Blue Source Energy, introduced by Christensen.
So moved?
Second.
Introduced by Christensen, seconded by Ward. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
This is a good thing.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes, it
Ward,
is.
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Item 4C, special permit 450R for Madonna Centers to allow for a new building at an existing non-residential healthcare facility at 5401 South Street, introduced by Christensen.
So moved?
Second.
Introduced by Christensen, seconded by Washington. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Oh,
It's a good thing.
it's a good thing.
Beyond a good thing. Madonna is a wonderful, fantastic asset for our community and our state. And I would be remiss if I did not mention Sister Phyllis Hunhoff at this moment, and who really got this Madonna started decades ago.
Thank you. That is a very good comment. Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. 4D is use permit 15E, application of JDM Learning for an early childhood care facility at South 27th and Old Cheney Road, introduced by Christensen.
So moved?
Second.
Introduced by Christensen, seconded by Ward. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Item 4E is amendment number 2 to the conditional annexation and zoning agreement for South 84th and Highway 2 with Andermatt and Iger Corp., introduced by Christensen.
So moved?
Second.
Introduced by Christensen, seconded by Schob. Any discussion?
We do have a motion to amend number 1.
So moved, removing instructions for the clerk to record the agreement with the Register of Deeds.
Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Seconded by Washington. Any discussion on the motion to amend, which will remove the instruction to file the agreement with the Register of Deeds? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Now on the main motion?
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Next, our public hearing, ordinances second reading, and related resolutions. Item 5A, change of zone, 19003, application of home-based storage for a change from AG Agriculture to H4 General Commercial on property generally located at 7480 North 56th Street.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Ray. I'm with JEO Consulting Group, 11717 Burt, Suite 210. Last name is Ray, R-A-Y. Here on behalf of the applicant to hopefully support this at your third reading for the change of zone on the western portion of the site. It has gone through some changes over the last year, and it is now a little bit simplified, and request the zone change to the H4 from the AG. I'm here for any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Ray? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Madam Chair, forgive me.
No.
Mr. Ray, do you have any preliminary plans for the property that you feel comfortable sharing with us?
Well,
It,
Here's the site plan right now. It was being used as camper storage. It's currently looking at other options for this site, hopefully with improving the site with actual structure. Once we get to that point, and the fill, go through a LOMAR process and all that type of thing. So eventually, there will be something that comes before the city with a building permit.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? We can go on.
All right, I'll call item 5B, change of zone 06063, B as in boy, application of Apples Way LLC to adjust the zoning line between the B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District Planned Unit Development and R3 Residential District Planned Unit Development Districts, convert office and commercial lots to attached single-family lots, and approval of a development plan which proposes modifications to the zoning and subdivision ordinances on property generally located at 84th and Adams Streets.
Welcome, Mr. Beckius.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the City Council, good afternoon. This change of zone to amend the North 40 PUD is to convert some existing commercial space, B2 commercial space, into R3 attached single-family housing.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, I'm sorry, Tom Beckius. My address is 6333 Apples Way.
Thank you.
There are some waivers to the lot dimensions and lot area in conjunction primarily with the cul-de-sac development, and then also with this area right here, this conversion to attached single family as well. This process has been contemplated for a couple of years at this point in time. The North 40 Homeowners Association, which comprises this area here, has voted in support of this change, and a letter of support was attached in the application. I believe all stakeholders have reached consensus on this conversion in general, but we do have one issue that we'd like to talk about with you today, and that is a pedestrian easement, and that's why I'm here appearing today. So as a part of this application, Planning Department had requested a pedestrian easement to run from the end of the cul-de-sac connecting to Windmill Drive, which is right here. The original proposed sidewalk is outlined here in blue for your reference. The North 40 Homeowners Association, while being generally very supportive of the conversion of the commercial land to residential use, didn't like the placement of that pedestrian easement and walkway. So you'll notice an outline here in red. That is an alternate plan that we had proposed to the neighborhood to run the pedestrian easement in another direction. You'll notice that both the blue and red proposed plans run on Outlot D. Outlot D is a detention cell. As this went through Planning Department, the neighborhood had suggested, they had actually requested removal of the sidewalk and pedestrian easement altogether. However, the red alternative is what was approved by the Planning Commission as it went through that hearing. The Planning Commission subsequently also added a landscaping requirement as well in order to shield this property owner from the sidewalk easement. And so that's the process as we've gone so far. Here with me today is actually a representative of the North 40 Homeowners Association. They still, and they will speak, but my understanding is that the association still does not want this sidewalk and pedestrian easement to connect the proposed cul-de-sac to the existing built environment. And they are wanting that pedestrian easement removed. So to that end, here is a proposal to simply remove the pedestrian easement from the proposed ordinance by striking sections 2D and E. At the end of the day, Apple's Way, as the developer of this property, fully understands the desire from the subdivision ordinance to have the pedestrian easement and is happy to comply with it, absolutely. However, also at the end of the day, we have heard time and time again from the existing owners, the existing residents of this area, that they do not want it. And so, as a developer, we're happy to provide it because that's what our subdivision ordinance calls for, but we also hear from the other side of the issue and hear from our neighbors that they do not want this. And at the end of the day, we don't know necessarily if the sidewalk is desirable enough to make the existing neighborhood unhappy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brittany.
Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Banders. I live at 8224 Windmill Drive. That would be this lot right here. So essentially, the sidewalk that's being proposed is going to literally back up to our backyard. My husband and I are strongly opposed to it, along with about 6 to 7 other neighbors on our street on Windmill Drive. We have 2 small children, maybe possibly have more, who love being in our backyard. We feel that this is going to take away some safety aspect for us. We have a walkout basement. We had actually picked that lot because it's essentially kind of an end lot, allowing for a little more privacy. We feel that having a sidewalk right up in our backyard will take away a lot of that. For our children being out there to play, we feel like there's potential for theft. We feel like sometimes those sidewalks are kind of hangouts for people. We don't feel that there's really a sufficient need for it. There's commercial businesses up over this way, which we don't feel that's going to help anymore with people being able to get there. I have a list of my neighbors who feel the exact same way we do. We feel we have a fairly quiet street besides the cars that go by, and we would very much like to keep it that way. I guess I'll just list a few of our neighbors who have voiced their concern too. Janet Gutula, Katie and Dan Bargan, Daryl and Tracy Poppy, Bevan Warren Piper, and then David Sturts, who all live within our street. I think another thing for us too is we feel most people that walk anyways prefer to walk what we call the lap around. So as far as all of us wanting to use that for any purpose, there would be none. And it's also in a very odd place. We also have all talked, we don't care to see boulders in the retention pond. What they're gonna have to do to put that sidewalk in, because the land slopes. We feel that would be not very appealing to look at constantly. Right now, it's kind of more eco-friendly with the grass and things like that, and we would like to keep it that way.
With that, we would be happy to answer any questions whatsoever that the council members may have.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. Will that outlet need any additional work to satisfy watershed management if the sidewalk doesn't go in?
If the sidewalk does not go in. If the sidewalk does not go in, Councilwoman Washington, The storm sewer runs right down here in this outlot. This is an existing detention cell that's graded as such and has capacity to add the additional stormwater without problem, without additional grading. Now, the question does become, however, if we were to add these sidewalks, because of the detention cell and the nature of all detention cells, the slope is such that in order to install these sidewalks, if I were to install the red option, I would need to cut into the hill, place a retaining wall, regrade, and then have to go through watershed management in order to make sure that the detention cell still maintains its original integrity.
Right.
If I were to install the blue option, for example, this outlot H right here, Councilwoman Washington, is a drainage area that feeds into the detention cell. So I would need to traverse in some way, shape, or form that drainage that leads into the outlot, piping, raised walkway, what have you. So these are not easy sidewalks to install necessarily. It's not as if we're talking about 5 feet of concrete laid on the floor or laid on the ground. We're gonna have to do more extensive work than that, but we're willing to, and happy to. You may notice on the original North 40 PUD Phase 1 of the residential, we did install a pedestrian easement and sidewalk here as required by the subdivision ordinance. However, in the last few months of our work here, the repeated comment that we have heard from the neighborhood is that they do not want the pedestrian easement. So we're trying to do our best to proceed forward in this fashion while also making the neighborhood happy if we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beckius.
Benny?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Beckius?
Yes, sir.
The other testifier's house is there on the corner, right next to the retention, and above that's where the new development's going in. How many new developable lots are going to be there?
So they are single-family attached. We have 4 actually up here. This will actually turn into 3, although 4 are shown there. And I believe that this is 22, but it might be 24.
Several new single-family dwellings will be built.
Attached single-family, so townhomes, if you will.
Thank you.
Sure.
That is helpful, thank you.
I have another question. The pedestrian ways are in the subdivision plans because there is a desire to reduce the block length or provide access.
Yes.
And so I am curious, since I'm not intimately familiar with this area, why is there a desire to connect either south or east? Can you tell me what's on the other side of the sidewalk? What would the sidewalk lead you toward?
So this is existing single-family residential in through here. And then you have another single-family residential subdivision here. The primary reason that you would probably want to connect through here is that we have Cahoe Elementary School, which is easily accessed through the residential streets of the subdivisions, probably about 6 blocks to the south and to the west.
So if you were a new resident and you moved into lot 50.
Sure.
Yes. Show me the route to Cahoe.
The route to Cahoe would be down here through the cul-de-sac, through the proposed sidewalk, down here onto 82nd Street.
Okay.
And then we'd have about 4 more blocks in order to get to Cahoe. But it's very walkable.
Okay. And if you didn't have the pedestrian walkway, you would walk, so
The alternative route?
yeah, the alternative route would be,
Well, you'd have about 1,700 feet of block length. The alternative route would either be up and around the commercial to the same way, or up down through here, take the existing pedestrian walkway through this roundabout and continue that way.
yeah, I'm just imagining a 5th grader taking the longer route
Sure.
when they thought they could just cut through the shorter route.
Sure. These
Walker, no.
Yeah, that's right.
these single-family townhome lots are under contract to one builder who is ready to get going, and it is imagined to be not senior housing, but housing that would appeal to seniors.
Seniors,
Can I make a comment there too? In my opinion too, if you want to go the safer route, would be to go through their cul-de-sac out and through the neighborhood. We have where the roundabout is, they'd be coming out closer to there, and there's a lot more traffic going on right there. And they're most likely not going to be going to 84th. So in my opinion, if I was a parent, I would prefer the other route because they're not going to come in contact with as much traffic.
I agree that parents would prefer that one.
Are there any other questions? Thank you both very much for coming down.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Are there questions that anyone would like to ask of staff? I have a question. Steve, are you the point person today?
Yay, Steve.
So Steve, this request to do away with the sidewalk seems a little strange to me, even though they presented their arguments. It seems like most neighborhoods want greater walkability. They're asking the city to be sure and put in these walking trails, pathways that might connect to either commercial or to schools. So I'm a little puzzled, but I appreciate your remarks that they would like to do away with a sidewalk.
Sure. Steve Henderson, Development and Review Manager for the Planning Department. So, well, to start with kind of the overall plan for the area, yes, as was noted by the applicant, there is already a pedestrian easement that runs between two houses, so that this property, the people living on this block, since the street does not continue through, people can continue north-south. This area, I would also note, is currently approved for commercial. So if this application was not coming forward, this house here or these three houses would be backing up to commercial uses. And as a matter of fact, today Jensen Tire is just to the northeast of this property. So to switching from commercial over to residential, and so now as we were looking at the residential, this was a plan that was shown at the meeting. Yes, we think that both students would be heading to Kehoe, and yes, this is the roundabout where you come in, but if were walking on this route, you would not be crossing the roundabout, you would not be interfering with traffic, you would not be put in harm's way from traffic, you would be simply walking along the sidewalk. So we do not view the route that, yes, it has to go east and back, but the fact that it goes toward the roundabout does not make this route any less safe. I would also note that part of the reason you would not want to go out and make the route much longer is there is actually a reason to go east. East is the city's bike trail. East, if you cross at this intersection, go further east, is Faith Lutheran School. We currently don't have the diagonal bike trail in place that would then ultimately connect over to Adams Street, but that is in our comprehensive plan to have a connecting trail. So, as well as just simply, there's a residential neighborhood to the east of 84th Street, and so maybe you're heading out on your bicycle or whatever the case would be, you might cross 84th Street and head toward the east. And so this pedestrian sidewalk makes those type of trips, whether it's by pedestrian, bicycle, children, adults, it makes it much shorter. The other thing we would note too is in terms of the most common way you see pedestrian easements is in between two houses. And we've moved away from where we used to have a 5-foot easement and people put their fences to now a 15-foot easement. So there's much more space in between them. And in particularly this location, so you have plenty of space in between these two. This would be completely open. And the sidewalk, in terms of an intrusion, here is their northeast corner of their property line. The sidewalk alone will be 30 feet away at the closest point to their sidewalk, to their property. So rather than being immediately adjacent to it and potentially 7 feet away, it's 30 feet away, and it's 30 feet away at one point. The majority of the sidewalk is actually adjacent to Jensen Tire or coming up in between these houses. And so it's these residents here who certainly benefit from the fact that they will have that shorter route. And while yes, as a runner, sometimes I appreciate having a variety of long routes, and I purposely do that. What nationwide you've seen is if you make pedestrian routes shorter, you actually encourage people who might otherwise not take a route because it's long, by having multiple shorter routes, you actually encourage pedestrian activity. So we don't find that it's a good thing to try to make a pedestrian route longer to encourage people to walk more. You actually discourage it because a lot of people are just simply looking for shorter routes. So for all of those reasons, we think the pedestrian sidewalk, while required, also makes a lot of good sense just for the residents who live there and the residents who are in the future. And we find particularly with a nice open visible sidewalk like this, it's not going to be a place that people are going to be hanging out. It's not going to be unsafe. We have probably 150 to 175 of these kinds of pedestrian sidewalks, and we're adding them in neighborhoods all of the time. So it's a very standard, typical thing. I understand why people might be a little concerned about it, but I think once it's there, you start to realize it's not a safety concern.
Because of the elevation, will they have to put in a retaining wall?
Potentially, there might be a little bit of a need for that. When we asked Watershed and management about it, they did not think it was going to be an overly expensive thing or something that would be overly intrusive, and the applicant's engineer agreed that it is something that is doable.
Thank you.
I have a question. I
James.
just kind of want to clarify that. So if the sidewalk, if that goes in, then there may potentially have to be a retaining wall, which would be the boulders. But, and I guess this question might be for Tom. Can I skip? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
I guess my first question is, will you email me a copy of your map that
Sure.
you have that outlines the different ones? And so and I appreciate you working with the neighborhood and trying to figure out different alternatives to, make the neighborhood happy. But in your interaction with the neighborhood, no one in the neighborhood really wanted this easement to go in?
Well, what I can tell you is that through my interactions with the neighborhood, that's absolutely correct. And it's not simply that neighbor, it's the neighbors across the street and the neighbors adjacent. To be perfectly frank with you, we as a developer are more than happy to comply with the subdivision ordinance, but we're flexible. The buyer of these lots that we already have in place are also, he is also flexible. Neither one of us are married to the idea of the pedestrian easement, but of course we do it because it's required by the subdivision ordinance. Now, you have a group of parties that are living right there on site that say they also do not want it. So at this point, the only group that's interested in the pedestrian easement is city planning.
So I don't know the answer to this question, but if that easement wasn't there, is that going to hurt the sale of those homes?
Of the townhomes?
You're right, that are going to be going in?
In my experience as a developer, the hardest lots to sell, some of the hardest lots to sell are the ones adjacent to the pedestrian easement because nobody wants to live next to them.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you both very much. Before we go on, we've had a request to take a 5-minute break, so we will take a 5-minute break and reconvene at no later than 4:30. Good afternoon. We're back from our short recess. Teresa, if you could go on to the next item, please.
Maybe better Next are 5C and D. Change of zone 19034, application of Kruger Holding Company for a change from AG Agricultural and P Public Use to R3 Residential and O3 Office on property generally located at South 84th and Rokeby Road, and the related use permit to allow up to 45,000 square feet of office space or up to 128 dwelling units in the O3 Office Park District with waivers for height and setbacks at South 84th and Rokeby Road.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group, here today on behalf of Kruger Development and the Milton Carroll Talcott Revocable Trust. This project, actually, give you some quick context, stems back to about 2017 when negotiations and work began, Kruger and his company on doing something that was truly a win-win for the community and the development community. This parcel of land right here was owned by the Talcott family, and it was included in a coalition of landowners that we had down there. However, it was going to take a very long sewer route here to provide urban services to that, and so discussions ensued because at the same time, Parks and Rec with the Jensen Park Master Plan had an area here that was somewhat unusual because it was on the other side of a drainage way. So a swap began and has been successful in that the Parks and Rec Department got roughly 40 acres here, which is more contiguous to the park and better in their master planning for uses there. And then this parcel here with kind of an odd shape, this is our office area, and then a connection road across the drainage way to residential back there. Came into the Talcott family, and so Kruger Development is working with them, and what is before you today is then the change of zone to allow for either multifamily or office uses here and residential there. And so we have worked extensively with the Parks Department and Watershed Management on getting that accomplished. And so we have this change of zone and the use permit for the office area before you. We will end up shortly amending the annexation agreement, the Rokeby Coalition annexation agreement, to include this land and to remove this land. And there are a couple other things going on with other properties in that annexation agreement. It covered 600 acres. And so we're gonna, I think, kill 3 birds with 1 stone on that eventually. So you don't see that's why you don't see an annexation before you right now. So be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Mike? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Okay, we can go on to item 5E and 5F, and I have to recuse myself because of a conflict of interest, and I will entertain a motion to nominate someone to take over as chair.
I'll nominate Benny.
Sure, second.
Second, several seconds. Let's have a roll call vote.
Who seconded?
Everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Washington, Christensen, Ward. You can pick.
We'll say Ward.
Okay. All right. Please call the roll.
Shob?
Should I vote yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes, and I will excuse myself.
We'll allow a moment for the chair to leave, and then we'll proceed with public hearing. And
Okay. All right.
Clerk, could you read item 5E and?
F?
Yes, 5E and F, please.
Change of zone 19026, application of the 8801 LLC for a change from AG Agricultural to R3 Residential and from AG Agricultural to R5 Residential, both on portions of property generally located at 8801 Holdridge Street, and approving a conditional zoning agreement between the city and Houseman Development for property generally located at 8801 Holdridge Street.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, Mr. Marshall. Welcome back.
Good afternoon to you. I'm glad to be back. I am here, so Brad Marshall with Olson, 601 P Street. I'm here on behalf of Hausman Development LLC. This is a project that we're proposing to change a change of zone in CUP. The change of zone is from AG to R3 and R5. I'll explain, as we kind of get into this, I'll explain the uniqueness of this map and the differing zone areas and why it's kind of L-shaped, if you will, or backwards L, or how you want to look at it. But the AG to R3 being this component on the east and the south portions of the property, and the remaining portion of the property being proposed to R5. The R3 is what we're going to consider as a transition zone from that R5 with the higher density to AGR that surrounds the property on the west, south, and east sides. First, I want to recognize that this is a difficult balance to develop parcels that are growing outward from the city to out and adjacent to acreages that we start building more infrastructure. The comprehensive plan calls for greater density to utilize that infrastructure more appropriately, and there's just a balance that we start getting into existing areas around the city of Lincoln and being cognizant of how we develop around those particular areas. I met with the HOA for Sunrise Estates in September, and we had a neighborhood public meeting also that same month, a few days later after that. It was very, very well attended. We did send out just additional invites beyond the 300-foot zoning in action from the planning, and we tried to extend it up about a half a mile away from the property to get the word out. This is for Hausman. This is very similar to two projects I'll mention, and I'll probably reference one more than the other, but East Lake Flats, that is down at 88th and Pine Lake Road, and Tamarin Ridge, that is in the southwest of Lincoln, down by Adams Elementary, 27th and Tamarin Ridge Road. The apartments will be pretty standard buildings with larger and smaller multifamily units. They will have anywhere from 80 units in one particular building to 9 in the smaller buildings. This is an image of East Lake Flats. These are 10 plexes, and we have very similar 9 type plexes on this particular project. And this is an image of the building style and architecture on the larger units, 41 to 80 plex units. Both of these were taken down at East Lake Flats. So first, on December 4th, Planning Commission voted 6-0 for a change of zone request and associated special permit. They did add a cap to the density for this development, in which we were agreeable. There was some concern about the density calculations on the CUP. That is very common practice to show the density allowed by the zoning. And the proposal right now is 542 units, and Planning Commission capped that with a 10% increase that puts the total to 596 units. This comes to be about 15 units per acre. In an R5 density, you are allowed up to 29 units per acre, and we've been seeing apartment complexes recently, they're probably around 20. So we are a little bit below that average for apartment type or multifamily type projects. I'll go back to the R3 buffer. The original plan that we presented at our neighborhood meetings to Sunrise Estates and the public neighborhood meeting is what is seen on this plan. I've highlighted particularly the area adjacent to the acreages that we have existing neighbors. These are 9-plex units, and in this area that's highlighted is 117 dwellings. We heard a lot of concern about the density adjacent to and having very like type uses adjacent to their acreage homes and properties. The developer took that into consideration and developed the plan that is now before you and part of the CUP, and has changed those multifamily 9-plex units to townhomes. So in that transitional area for the R3, we don't have 117 units anymore. We have 66, excuse me, in that area, it's actually 44 units. And that includes another 22 for 66 on the north side of the road. So we went from 117 down to 44 units adjacent to the existing neighborhood. The plan connects to the existing acreages at one location on each side of the property, on the east, south, and west. Access management policy followed by the City of Lincoln only allows one adjacent connection to West Holdridge, being an arterial roadway or a major arterial roadway. I will point out also there is an existing 80-foot buffer that is a LES transmission line along the east side of the property, which actually accounts, it's offset from the property, and so its overall buffer back to any adjacent dwelling or buildable building would be 90 feet. That is on the south, or excuse me, on the east side of the property. A traffic study was completed by Olson, showing that a roundabout at 93rd and Holdridge, which would be the main connecting street out of the development, would be adequate to serve the additional dwellings and the density for the proposed development. And I'll mention that our study actually included 646 units that was on the original plan, and so that is about 100 additional dwellings more than we are showing currently. The conditional zoning agreement outlines two major improvements for this development, which includes a sanitary sewer extension from the Waterford development. I've got shown approximately on this line here. Waterford development is on the east side of Sunrise Estates acreages, where there is an existing manhole that was terminated several years ago and will be constructed across and through the properties of Sunrise Estates, excuse me. The easements for that particular sanitary sewer line had been dedicated on a final plat with Sunrise Estates several years ago, and so we do have an approximate route. What's shown here and has been attached to the use permit is approximate at this time and will be final design during the coming months here, as we would look forward to working with the residents that are adjacent to this project. Finally, the Holdridge Street improvements, that I'll call them, basically includes improvements from 87th Street to 93rd. The conditional zoning agreement outlines Lincoln on the Move funds that would be utilized to partially fund this project in the amount of about $1 million. The total project cost is about 1.8, in which the developer will be putting forward the additional $800,000 through impact fees. I'll just say lastly, from details perspective, Houseman Development LLC does go through HUD financing. They have done on several other projects, like I had shown you for East Lake Flats. It's a pretty rigorous process. We've done this with them on several projects. The federal government outlines how you look at properties to develop them from environmental, from a drainage study, from traffic, and so forth. And so they will be following those guidelines for this project as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. We have questions for the testifier?
Mr. Chairman, would you,
Madam Washington?
hello. Would you show us the R5 development, please?
Yes, absolutely.
We have some questions.
So this is the current plan. There we go, if you can see that. This is the current plan, and I pointed out the townhomes on the south and the east, and then the remaining portion of the property is going to be zoned, or proposed to be zoned R5. So a few of the 9-plex units that I showed on the exterior of the project have now been brought interior as well. As you can see, there's 8 units here. The development does have a clubhouse associated with it as well.
Okay. And there's a row of townhomes above the R3, correct?
Yes.
On the south side.
So for instance, there's 22 townhomes on the east side, and let's see here, approximately 20 on the south.
And then just north of that red line on the south, there it looks like there's another row of townhomes.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you have some 9-plexes.
Yes, and those 9-plexes would be concentrated right here.
Okay. Would you show me on the map which of the buildings are the tallest buildings?
Yeah, well, by zoning, the R3 would be able to have a height limit up to 35 feet.
Right.
It would be standard, single-family attached or detached. And then the taller apartment complexes would be west of 93rd and north of Peregrine, if I'm saying that right. Peregrine. They would be north. And so those units would be allowed to be up to the height limit for the R5.
And what is the height limit for
waiver.
R5?
I believe we have a waiver as well on this with a 55-foot limit.
But what's the height limit for R5 without the waiver?
Testing my knowledge, I believe it's 40 or 45. We may confirm with Steve.
Hang on to that one. We'll get Mr. Henderson up there. He'll know the answer.
I think.
Not quite yet. I think Mr.
I think
Bowers
Mr.
has some
Bowers.
questions of Mr. Marshall. Are there other questions, Mr. Marshall, after Mr. Bowers? Mr. Marshall, if you...
All right, so I got a couple different questions, and a lot of it I think has to do with like clarification. Can you pull up this map just so I can follow along? Okay, so can you explain to me, can you just kind of outline like and point how people would get into the development that's going in? There's going to be a roundabout on 93rd Street, right?
Yes, there would be a roundabout approximately at that location.
Okay.
That matches up with the driveway across from it.
And then is there going to be any other entrance into that area?
Not from Holdridge, but there will be one from Duane Lane on the east, and 90th Street, I believe, is the south connection. Then we are stubbing a street out to the church property to the west for future connection and redevelopment of that property.
And so and I could be wrong on this, but there has to be 2 connections into a development, right? So with the road going into the church or the road coming off of, I guess, would that count for the second connection without opening up Duane and that other one?
No, because the church connection to the west would just solely be there for future connection. It would be connecting to anything. That property largely is undeveloped at this time.
Are there any other developments in Lincoln that you're aware of where there's only one connection into the development?
From an arterial roadway?
Right.
I I would think so. I'm not thinking like of an example right now, but.
Yeah, and I realize I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit.
No problem, but because of access management policy, we are kind of bound by the guidelines of the single connection in this particular case.
One of the concerns that I have is, and I was out there last night driving around, and I've driven out there a couple different times. I have some concerns about Duane Lane, and I apologize, I don't know the other one that would come in.
92nd.
92nd Street. I have some concerns about those roads being able to maintain an increase in traffic. Can you address that? I'm worried about the makeup of the road, the width of the road. I just have some major concerns about opening that up, and if you could address that, I would appreciate it.
So connections to the existing acreages.
Right.
Particularly. As I alluded, this is where some of the more difficult conversations come in. Where we have this development was annexed, and several people here will probably tell you when it was about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And so these are public roadways now. They were private, they're rural in nature, they don't have curb and gutter, they don't have sidewalks and so forth. One of the major considerations, I guess, for this development here was utilizing 93rd as the major access point, building a brand new roundabout for the development so that it could have a higher capacity of traffic to come and filter in and out of the project, as we're introducing 500 units or more to this project. I heard the same concerns that you heard from all of the neighbors and public meetings that we were at about traffic going through their developments, kids waiting for buses, people are zooming in and out because they can't get out to Holdridge Street, 98th Street, people having troubles turning left onto Holdridge, heading towards town, go to work in the morning, cutting through, going on Duane Lane. I don't have the perfect answer for that concern, I guess. It probably will happen. I won't say it won't. I think also, not only will people maybe cutting through the Waterford development through Sunrise Estates, but I think this is supposed to be a benefit for Sunrise Estates as well, as they've got Lynwood Lane, and again, what we heard was as the traffic's coming down Holdridge Street that they're trying to turn out, they will now have recourse to come through the development and get right into a roundabout and exit onto Holdridge a little bit more easily. So I think traffic probably will increase through the development. I don't know how we govern that, how we control that particularly, but I hope that the major dollars that we're talking about for roadway improvements here benefits not only this development, but it benefits the adjacent properties as well.
And so I don't have the answer to this question. With the way that the roads were created before this area was annexed in, with the increase in traffic, is it going to wear down those roads and destroy those roads quicker than traditional city roads would be?
You may have more trips per day across that development, and so you may have wear faster. They still are residential streets. I don't think that semis are going to be cutting through these developments to get there, so I wouldn't anticipate major infrastructure problems from that. But it's quite possible that maintenance would be required on those public streets now a little bit more often.
One thing that I've heard some conflicting information on is the trees on the east border and then also on the south border. Is the intention to leave those trees there or to take those trees out? I mean, I get that the roads are going to have to go in, right? But like, is the intention to leave the other trees there or to take those out?
So that's a really good question. Al Wellman, that owns this property today, will tell you that he planted so many trees there along particularly the east boundary of the property. They're nice looking trees, and I think the development's position is they would like to leave those as a buffer. Those are going to be 90 feet from new homes, away from where we're going to be doing a majority of our grading and so forth. And so we're a little bit at the mercy, though, is because this is a transmission line, that LES may require those trees to come out. under their easement agreement, they can come in and say that they need trees within that space to be removed. They have indicated that. I don't know how many of those trees actually fall within that easement or not. I think we're in the process of identifying them. But what I can tell you, if they don't need to come out, they will stay.
And that transmission line is just on the east border though, correct? So what about the south border?
The south border, what we've indicated is that those trees would stay. That's like an old hedge line, fence line. Trees have kind of gone rampant. They're everywhere. What we indicated is that we would clean those up as much as we possibly could, but we would not just flat remove everything we possibly could either. Going through there and picking the nicer trees that would have some value, we would keep those.
And another question that I have, and if anyone else has any questions, I don't mean to monopolize. Okay,
yet,
thanks.
I'm getting old.
I lost my train of thought. So if originally there was plans to be apartment complexes kind of throughout where the R3 will be going in. So there was going to be screening originally, from what I understand correctly, right?
There was. So under the multifamily adjacent to the AGR, there had been discussions about providing additional screening if the trees were to remain, or if we could complement that with something. At the time, we talked, and the request had come from the HOA, from Sunrise Estates, to provide fencing. We had agreed to that when it was multifamily. So when we changed the requirement, there is a change of requirement when you go from the apartments to single-family attached units, just the normal single-family residence and lot, and the requirement for screening to adjacent properties goes away. And so with the change and with from the development from the applicant is we decreased the density by over 50% on the perimeter, and that fence requirement is no longer going to be part of the project. It does not prohibit anybody coming in to purchase one of those units, put up their own fencing. What I had heard at the meetings was that there was concern about nineplexes, and you're introducing all of these new families adjacent to one or two acreage lots, and you have families and kids running through, and there's really no barrier to prevent trespassing and going to play on somebody's swing set or whatever it was. With the proposed now with townhomes, I think that and the density being decreased quite a bit, I think the developer would say that they have taken a big step to try to alleviate some of that concern.
What kind of fencing was going to go up originally?
East Lake Flats, my main example, they have kind of I'd say a wrought iron, but I think it's aluminum black fencing, and that would be complemented with some landscaping as part of the apartment project. But now it will be, again, townhomes and backyards, and people may do their own landscaping as to what would go there.
And that was originally going to go along the east and the south border, correct?
Correct.
And then if the fencing was going to go up.
One more, finish this one, and then we'll move on to let Mr. Henderson talk for a bit.
Okay, and then if the fencing was going to go up, was the plan to take the trees down, or was the plan to leave the trees up and put the fencing up at the same time?
Under that scenario, we would have to work a landscape plan that would complement the transmission line requirements. And so, again, if they're going to require us to remove the trees that were there, we would have complemented those on the adjacent property, probably more to the western side of the transmission line, so that we could control that a little bit better.
Awesome.
And then the fencing, I don't know, I mean, it could have gone any which direction, but we haven't pursued that any further.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Hang on your thoughts, we might come back to that. Any other questions for Mr. Marshall? Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall. Hang on, you'll get a rebuttal later. Mr. Henderson, would you come up and help us from a staff perspective?
Steve Hendrickson, Development Review Manager for the Planning Department. I can answer the first question, which was what is the height limit in the R5?
Yes.
And it is 35 feet. It's not until the R7 that it goes to 45 feet for multifamily, and R8 to 75 feet. So it is quite typical, though, for a lot of our suburban apartment complexes that they've asked for height limits of 50 or 55 feet for the multifamily, because that's now very typical with 12-foot floors, that you can't even get 3 floors of an apartment building with a pitched roof under 35 feet.
Other questions for Mr. Henderson? Did you want to ask some of your questions about roads and fencing and screening?
Do you have any thoughts on the road situation that I brought up earlier about the quality of the roads that were made before the city annexed to this area of town in, and if they have the same resiliency, I guess, compared to city roads, traditional city roads?
Yes, I mean, certainly that was something that we discussed with Lincoln Transportation and Utilities. I think a lot of the thought had to go to the fact that actually the adjacent neighborhood benefits quite a bit by being able to go into this development, because at the new intersection, which would be a roundabout, that will be the primary way people will be able to turn out left out of the neighborhood. There's not any plans for improvement at Lynwood Lane, which is to the east, and I'll try to give a little bit broader zoom out here. So really, the existing Lynwood here, by having these connections, and there's two different things going on. We have a block length would probably require the multiple 4 connections, and so meeting the block length requirement is how you get the additional connections. Emergency services always likes to have 2 ways in and out of any type of a development, apartments, commercial, whatever it would be. Just simply if one gets blocked and they get a second heart attack call, they have some way else to get into any kind of development through that second way. So there's 2 different things going on. It's the block length that would have the multiple connections. I would also note that the adjacent development, Sunrise Estates, was originally approved as a build-through acreage subdivision. And that's part of the reason why the recommendation of approval was for the R5 and the R3, is that while today Sunrise Estates is zoned AGR, it is actually set up to be rezoned as R1 in the future, because each one of the individual lots has between 2 to 3 future lots planned for it, with the idea that these acreage lots, once they're connected to city water and sewer, would then be able to further subdivide if the property owners so chose to do that. We also have down here in the southeast corner of Sunrise Estates an outlot that is owned by the association that was formerly used for a horse stable and is now for sale, and is primarily being looked at as being redeveloped with R3 zoning, and that would probably mean the adjacent road to it would be brought up to urban standard. So in the longer term, certainly probably many of these roads, particularly with additional subdivisions, might be brought up to urban standards. And Lincoln Transportation and Utilities did not have any concerns that this particular development was going to be damaging and was going to ruin the adjacent roads. We certainly can't say that there won't be some traffic that will go back and forth between the neighborhood, but certainly with that new roundabout at 93rd, so to speak, and Holdridge, that provides the easiest way for people to get left out. And certainly, and I'll just go a little bit further to the east here, the bond issue that was approved, this is the new elementary school that was approved as part of that bond issue and is looking to open in August of '22. And so it is serving an area east of 84th Street, so you'll probably have some additional morning trips heading east to the school or afternoon trips, which would make the left turns out on Lynwood Lane in the near term more difficult. And that's why it's good to have the connections from the neighborhood, because then they'll have the easier way to be able to get out through the new roundabout.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Henderson before he moves? Everyone's quiet. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to testify on this agenda item? If you would, please come forward. We have 2 microphones, no waiting. I think Mr. Henson's going to get his keyboard underneath you, so yeah.
So real quick before I get started, I want to thank you for being so prompt with this. When we sat before the Planning Commission back in December, we didn't get to speak until about 9:30 that evening. So this is going much quicker, so that this is really good. My name is Ted Wolfram, and along with my wife Carlene, we live at 1040 North 92nd Street, which is an acreage within Sunrise Estates. I'm here on behalf of Sunrise Estates Communities. I'm the president of their HOA, and real quick, I just wanted to show we have several of the residents here. So those residents, just raise your hands. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So Sunrise Estates is a community of 28 acreages, and it borders on the proposed zoning change property on the south and east, which has already been displayed. Obviously, we can't see into the future as how this project will affect Sunrise Estates or East Lincoln, but we do have several concerns with rezoning to add approximately 600 units to this property. Waterford Estate continues to grow, and as was just mentioned, LPS has announced a new elementary school. And with that is going to be providing some increased traffic in the area. So as we think about this, we still have several concerns we want to introduce, and one of them, which has always been there for us, has been traffic. Sunrise Estates requested a traffic study, and it was produced. From our view, and supported by the traffic study, we feel the infrastructure is not in place to support the increased traffic flow, as there are currently red flags in this study. Most large complexes, apartment complexes in Lincoln, are served by 2 or more major streets which allow traffic to diffuse. And was mentioned a little bit earlier by Brad, East Lake Flats is one of the areas that has been presented to us as something that's going to kind of emulate what we're going to be having next to us. And this is let's see, is that on there very well? Yeah. So this is a picture of East Lake Flats, and what I wanted to show you here really is how it's supported by the roads. If you look on the northern part of it, you have Pine Lake Road, which is 4-lane divided with turn lanes, which has an access out to 84th Street and then 91st on the right. 91st Street, which again is 2 to 4 lanes divided with turn lanes, which then exits down to Highway 2. On the west side, you can see 88th Street, which has been put in there. It's 2 to 3 lane divided, which allows access into this apartment complex. And then on the south, you have Elgar Drive again, which as you go out to the west, it gives you easy access out to 84th. So we think, and as it's shown here, I think, was even mentioned a little bit earlier when they talked about this, is that the infrastructure is already in place to be able to handle this additional traffic. 600 living units, though, is significantly added to the already heavy traffic on Holdridge between 84th and 98th Street. East Holdridge was not built out beyond 86th Street to absorb the increased traffic at Waterford, as Waterford continues to grow, and now for the new proposed school. There are no traffic signals, roundabouts at any of the intersections east of 84th Street, including the heavily used 98th and Holdridge. We feel Holdridge should be improved to 4 lanes east of 86th Street out to 98th Street, with roundabouts at 90th Street and 98th Street before rezoning to allow the 600 additional resident units to be built. The rezoning would also connect 600 units to Duane and 92nd Street, which leads into Sunrise Estates. And if you look at this picture right here is where the development site's going to be. Here is Duane Lane. As you can see, it leads right into Sunrise Estates, and the exit either back out to Holdridge or as it filters into Waterford Estates, and then your exit's back on 98th. 92nd Street now goes south, which again, you'd have to take Avon over into Sunrise Hills and either back out into Waterford to be able to exit. So the result in the increased traffic raises safety concerns for those in Sunrise Estates in this quiet resident area. In summary, we feel that the proposed improvement to Holdridge is not enough for the rezoning to allow 600 units because the streets are not capable of handling this traffic. The increase in population density in the rezoning area has significantly impacted quality of life and property values in Sunrise Estates as well as Waterford Estates. Apartment complexes on this site generally are located adjacent to commercial centers. And if you look at this one we have right here, you can see where we have Sam's, Walmart, Menards, and so forth. Jamming a large complex into a quiet residential area does not make sense to keep Lincoln a very desirable place. We understand and agree with the R3 rezoning. We're looking to be able to rezone all of this to R3.
Keep going.
That would be our desire. The acreages of Sunrise Estate will be very attractive to the residents of the new complexes, the new apartment complex, the townhomes, and the children and their pets, which raises privacy infringement concerns. To them, our backyard will look like a park. To avoid conflicts between residents in the apartment complexes and the duplex and Sunrise Estates residents, We would like to see some type of a fencing. We were just talking a little bit about that. So we're looking to be able to still maintain that fencing around the perimeter of the property. There are other concerns that I don't have time really to be able to describe, but I will just highlight those quickly in considering the watershed runoff as you convert 35 acres of farmland to 35 acres of concrete and asphalt roofing. There's also going to be the additional noise that's going to be generated by 1,200 cars and 1,200 people that are going to be living in this area, as well as the light pollution that's going to be populated by this. We do, however, know that Lincoln is growing and surrounding Sunrise Estates. We know something is going to be built in this property. In our early discussions with Olson Engineering, we raised many of these concerns, and Olson was actively listening and has addressed many of these concerns, and we thank Olson, and particularly Brad, for being able to listen and champion some of these concerns for us. Specifically, and as Brad already mentioned, we've gone from 728 units down to the 542, and also by the removing of the apartments on the perimeter. This provides a little bit more of that transition that we were looking for, going from single acreages to single-family dwellings in the townhomes, then up to the apartments. But this is a good news, bad news for Sunrise Estates, because now instead of having the apartments 50 feet from our home, that's the good news, but because there are no longer apartments there, that means we're no longer having fencing, which is kind of the bad news, and this is what we're looking for, that privacy infringement issue. So in conclusion, I would like to move, it would be more favorable from a Sunrise Estates perspective that we could take this entire 35 acres and look at being able to zone that as an R3 for the much needed single dwelling homes here within the Lincoln area. However, if zoning change is approved, we are requesting an amendment to the application to include a fence be built along the southern and eastern parameters of the perimeter of the property. A fence built with quality material and provide consistent look along the perimeter. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for this testifier?
I just have one question.
Sure.
When you purchased your property over at Sunrise Estates, did anyone disclose what the future of this area was going to turn into?
Not to me. I'll be honest with you, I didn't ask the question.
Okay.
We were so excited about being able to move into a type of an acreage that we did. We moved in. And we were able to meet the man who was selling the property across the barbed wire fence. That's our fence right now, is a barbed wire fence. And we had many discussions along the fence line with him, so he's a very nice gentleman. But I certainly understand his reasoning for being able to, for actually selling this property now, as even mentioned during the annexation process, that if annexed, he was probably going to have to sell this property because of the increase in the taxing increase and so forth. And that's not the sole purpose for him making the move now and selling the property, but it was a contributing factor.
Since you're the president of the HOA, when you've talked with your neighbors, has that been a common theme where people bought these properties and they weren't told what it was going to turn into, according to like the comp plan?
I haven't had that discussion, I guess,
Okay.
with the neighbors. We're the newest kids on the block. We've only been in Sunrise Estates for 4 years, and they've been there. Some have been there probably 30 years. I mean, they were the, if you want to call them charter members of Sunrise Estates.
Status.
Yeah, as Lincoln is growing, I think we all have kind of understood that Lincoln is growing. We know that. Annexation proved that point to us 2 years ago. We're fairly well surrounded by Lincoln. And I think, like I said a minute ago, that we know that once this property was sold, we know something is going to go in there. We didn't know what. The density thing is a big deal kind of for us because, if we can put in single dwelling homes and that type of thing, it keeps the density down, but allows the area to grow. And it kind of meets a need of what Lincoln's looking for right now with some of those single family dwellings. So.
Thank you so much for coming out, and thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
Would anyone else in the chamber like to speak?
Thank you. My name's Lance Schupbach. My address is 9341 East Avon Lane, where I live with my wife, Michelle, and my daughters, Harper, Amelia, and Camden. I also appear with strong concerns shared with Mr. Wolfram and many of my neighbors regarding the proposed agenda items referred to as the 8801 Holdridge project. I would urge you, as Mr. Wolfram, to consider revising or denying the change in the permit as proposed. It's been well described by your materials and also by Mr. Marshall. I share the general objection that it violates the spirit of our comprehensive plan in ways that are aesthetically undesirable and worse, possibly compromising safety. Our specific concerns are that it's such an abrupt change in housing density and architectural profile. Also, the safety and traffic function of those area streets that are, as they've mentioned, no larger than 2 lanes, sometimes less. They're very popular walking routes, not just for us, but for our neighbors to the south and the west in Sunrise Hills and Waterford. And they would be accommodating, by my estimate, at least 1,000 new vehicles, perhaps, with an up to 596 unit complex. I would also like to add to what Ted said, that we don't necessarily view the roundabout at 93rd that's proposed as a benefit to us. We can exit, if we want to go westward on Holdridge, we can exit through Sunrise Hills to the west onto 84th headed northbound. So we don't, we appreciate all that infrastructure work, but I don't think we'd use it very much. And it wouldn't enhance our safety or our commutes. We are concerned that development of all those new units wouldn't have much access to green space other than our private area. That it's the route to the schools might be difficult. We're also, of course, as they've mentioned, worried about destruction of the current trees and the wildlife habitat. As Ted referred to, we appreciate the important stewardship of our community's housing needs by you, the council, by our planning commission, and by our planning department. We're grateful for the efforts of Mr. Wesselhoff, Mr. Anderson, and their colleagues. We're also grateful to the information we got from Mr. Marshall and Olson and from the Wellman family. Concerning what Mr. Bowers said to Mr. Wolfram, I think when we moved in about 14 years ago, we knew that Lincoln was going to grow and Lincoln was going to have needs, but we didn't imagine such a giant project shoehorned into that 36-acre area right next to us. We think that growth needs to meet acceptable technical and aesthetic standards, including an appropriate density transition, both for those aesthetic concerns, but also for the safety of our community and of our children of that area. In this very disproportionate instance, despite what Mr. Marshall has asserted, we don't think the standards are met, and both by what Mr. Wolfram outlined as what they did in East Lake Flats with more access to bigger 4-lane roads, are also just common sense. It just seems like too much in too small of an area. So we ask that you deny or further revise the change of zone and special permit, and we thank you for listening to us and for your service.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of this testifier? Thank you again. Would anyone else in the council chambers like to speak on this agenda item? If there are others that wish to speak, would you please move to the front? There are 2 microphones.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Janet Chung. I live at 9501 Eastview Road. I have a husband. Do I have to mention his name?
Oh.
Okay, thank you. So I'm in Sunrise Estates, as you've heard, and I thought as I was preparing some talking points that I might refresh your memory about the last time I appeared before the city council.
I remember. Please refresh my memory.
Yes, so some of you may not have been here. It was around 2017 during the annexation process. And one of our major concerns was the service provided by fire and police. I don't know if this shows up, but it's the article about the Sky Ranch Acres fire. Sky Ranch Acres is a development that's, there it is, east of us. So east of us is Waterford, and then Sky Ranch is further east. So a house caught fire, and it was on an acreage. They have no fire hydrants, which is pretty much what our development is acreages, 3 to 5 acres, no fire hydrants. So if there's a fire, you have to get water to our house and get the water from the truck into the house. During the Sky Ranch Acres fire, 80 firefighters responded. Not 79, 80 is what the article says. So our homeowners association was concerned about service for acreages, and now we're seeing that you want to put in apartments next to 600 units next to us. And so I don't know if you've hired more firefighters to, if there's a fire at one of our acreages, but there is another 600 people or units next to us. have you, I guess, increased the fire service to respond to any concerns at that complex, or even police? So when I was looking through the planning commission letters, I noted that some of our Waterford residents have mentioned that they've called in for police service and that the response time has been 20 to 30 minutes. So we're concerned, obviously, about the fire service and police service. And so you've seen a lot of maps. I'm not going to bore you with maps, but I thought I'd just put some numbers up. So you've heard the numbers. Sunrise Estates, we have about 111 acres, 28 homeowners. Each homeowner has 3 to 5 acres. The new complex is on 35 acres. They're proposing 596 units. That's 17 units per acre. If it was the standard 3 houses to an acre, we would be looking at a proposal of 105 houses. So quite a bit of difference for density. And I guess Steve Hendrickson had mentioned that the Horse Barn property, we're looking at having that rezoned for R3. And I have missed some of our homeowners association meetings, but I'm not aware that we've requested a change in zoning for the Horse Barn property. So that's the density. I thought instead of showing a map for traffic, let's look at some numbers. Sunrise Estates, if you look at the 28 homes, we have probably 84 cars. As you've heard, the 8801 is looking at 1,000 parking spaces. If the development was going to be a housing, 3 acres or 3 houses to an acre, it'd be about 345 cars probably. A reminder, as you've seen on the maps in the previous discussion, Holdridge is a 2-lane street. There's no turning lanes. Sunrise Estates has asphalt roads, no shoulder, no marked lanes. And I will just tell you that when we're walking through the neighborhood, cars drive by very fast. There's a call, we had a call in to the sheriff's department when we were still, before we were annexed, and they came out, the county engineer did a road study, and she was surprised at the number of cars. People from Waterford drive through our homeowners association in order to avoid 84th and O. They would rather go out 84th and Holdridge because 84th and O is congested. But now you're talking about adding 600 units to 84th and Holdridge. So those people are going to be driving through our homeowners association community trying to get out to 84th and O, adding to that congestion. Those are our concerns. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Questions for this testifier? Thank you very much for coming forward. Are there others in the chamber that would like to speak on this agenda item?
Do I have to sign in?
It would be wonderful if you did. Sign in on the pink sheet. Yes, that will become a part of the official record. We know you are here.
My name is Stan Berlowitz. I live at 9300 Avon Lane. With my wife Linda, and we lived there for 24 years. I'll be brief in my comments, but I would like to start by saying that I fully support our president's comments, Ted Wolfram. With that having been said, as I said, we lived there for 24 years and enjoyed the wildlife and the tranquility of acreage life. And an answer to one of the questions earlier is no, we were never advised of any of the developments that are currently occurring. Waterford was a complete surprise. That changed everything. And of course now the Wellman development is a total surprise as well. You know, we understand the inevitability of progress and development, but would prefer that our neighborhood remain unchanged. We also realize that's not possible. We do have, my wife and I have 2 major concerns regarding the proposed change of zoning. First is the abrupt radical change from our 3 to 5 acre lots to high density apartments. We fully appreciate the Planning Commission's recommendation to reduce the density and buffer the transition by bordering the south and east with single-family townhomes. Our preference would be for all of it to be single-family. However, that's probably not likely. Secondly, due to the Waterford development, our neighborhood has already changed drastically from a quiet, secluded, traffic-free refuge to a two-lane hiker, biker, dog run with all of the associated problems. There's no sidewalks in the neighborhood, and the streets are currently filled with walkers, bicycles, and pets, even in the dawn and dusk times of the day, the most dangerous times of the day. We now have all the associated traffic from Waterford. We have trash littering the roadway and pet waste we never had before the Waterford development. And now we're looking at 600 and some new dwellings. And the Wellman development will increase this tremendously. My property directly abuts the southeast corner of the Wellman development, and the water line will go right through my property onto the Wellman development. In my view, and I've already seen it, our open areas are a magnet for others who see the open spaces not as private property, but as an open invitation to utilize our green spaces for their own purposes, whatever that be. Children playing, pet exercise, riding utility vehicles. Our association has wrestled with that episode in the past, and it's simply not acceptable to my wife and I. Accordingly, we implore the city to require, as part of this development, to provide appropriate fencing on the, I said I was going to be brief, on the appropriate fencing on the south and east sides of the development so as to discourage trespassing and unauthorized use of our green spaces by the hundreds of new residents proposed in this development. And with that, I'll close.
Thank you very much. Questions for this testifier? Anyone? I appreciate you coming forward. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the chamber would like to speak on this agenda item?
I'd like to speak. I'm Dan Howe. I live at 1001 North 92nd Street, and that would be located on this map.
Oops. Bring your map back.
92nd Street here.
Wait, hold on just a second. We can't see it. Now start pointing.
Okay. My residence would be right here. It's an acreage.
Well, we thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. From 92nd Street, I have 540 feet of property here that's directly south and adjacent to the Wellman development. And I'm opposed to the development from the standpoint of I would much prefer to have ag land there forever, but I know that the city's going to expand and grow. But two things I would like concessions on written into the zoning change. One is that they reinstate the fencing that they had. And I'd like to have a fence between me and 500 of my newest neighbors. And I think that a fence, a quality fence to prevent pets and children from playing in what they're going to perceive as a park relative to the small space they have in their lawn. I would like to have a barrier there. And the other thing I would like to request is that the residences on the height requirement for the housing, it's R3, but if they could have that be single story, maybe zero access entry, so people could just, roll right in. We need that kind of housing in Lincoln. I think it'd be great if the perimeter townhouses were single story, zero entry for a threshold. And last thing I'll say before I get down is 92nd Street is not urban standard for streets. It doesn't have curbs and sidewalks or anything else. Right now on 92nd Street, it's either Ted going home or my family going home or somebody that's lost and going to turn around in the cul-de-sac and leave. But if you think about the density that's there, and they have the primary entrance to the north, and that'll be great for that area, but there'll be a lot of traffic going through a non-urban street, and there's only there's two non-urban streets. I mean, it's a lot different than where they've had high density of housing in the past. Thank you for your time, and I'll sign in here.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there others? Mr. Marshall, would you like some rebuttal time?
Maybe a minute or two. I do appreciate the comments on the traffic. I do. We have worked hard to get where we are on the proposed improvements. Like I said, as we extend out of the city of Lincoln, one of the comments was it would be wonderful if all of the infrastructure was in place. But as you've seen many of times, sitting where you are, a lot of the development does drive the infrastructure as we do build it. And Lincoln on the Move, we're proud to have this kind of partnered into this development and utilize new growth funds for the new roadway improvements extending from 87th to 93rd, including a roundabout. Olson and the traffic study that we have shown that the 2 lanes and median bisecting those 2 lanes extending from the city to the east through 93rd is going to be a much safer roadway. And even with this development and future growth needs with Lincoln to the east, that 2-lane will accommodate. You can think Yankee Hill Road, if you will. That is a 1-lane road on each direction, as it occurs today with a single-lane roundabout. Can handle up to 10,000 trips per day. So I did want to make that clear. The analysis did find some deficiencies in the system, if you will. And so, 84th and Holdridge, and you look at some of those major intersections that are signalized today, it's like several intersections that don't have right turn lanes and dual lefts and so forth. Someday the city may get to those improvements as well. As far as the development is concerned and looking at those improvements, they have dedicated every dollar that they will be collecting in impact fees and trying to improve Holdridge Street to the best standard that the city of Lincoln has partnered with the Housman Development LLC so far on the Lincoln on the Move project. So I just wanted to touch base that and thank all the work that has kind of gone beyond that with LTU and the planning department with Steve Hendrickson to get us to where we are today. I do appreciate, and I will just say again, like the drainage and so forth, we are always cognizant of the development and the runoff there. There are trees that are going to stay. There are going to be buffers that we can hopefully utilize through that with detention areas and so forth. There's a large area to the northwest corner of the property. Granted, it doesn't go adjacent to the development of Sunrise Estates, but a great majority of these trees in this draw will stay, and even in this corner where we've even identified some environmental advantages of keeping some of those trees in place. So that is all that I wanted to come back up for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we're finished with this agenda item. It's time to move on to the next one. Would someone retrieve our chair? Mr. Kerr. Thank you all for your participation. It was good to hear from you. Thank you, Mr. Wolfram, for signing in. This is a public hearing. We'll continue with our public hearing items. There'll be no votes on these things today. We will move on. Madam Chair, do I need to gavel anything, or do I just kind of stop talking and she takes over again? I like that.
Okay, that's great.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
We'll go on to items 5G and H. They are street and alley vacation 19005, application of Hilltop Foundation to vacate the east-west alley adjacent to property generally located at 2234 Holdridge Street, as well as a street name change to rename Hilltop Road as Hilltop Place.
Good evening, council.
I thought it was still after.
Dan Marvin with Urban Development. So Michelle in our department is handling the street and alley vacation, and so what I've put up here is a map that identifies the street that's being vacated, and here's another map to kind of show the future plat of what's going to happen. And I think when you look at the two, you can see there's going to be additional lots that will not need the use of that street. So they were just going to stub this, and then the yellowed area is going to be the vacated property, of which our departments assess the value per square foot at $1.50 a square foot.
Sandra?
I have a question, Mr. Marvin.
Okay.
Can you explain what kind of access there will be along what was Hilltop Road? Will there be any access, or will there be a fence?
Actually, we have somebody here that's going to talk through the whole layout, but I think they're just going to keep a little stub here at the end. And then the access into this development will come off of this street.
I'll put up a different map. Good evening, Tim Gergen with the Clark Henderson Partners, representing Hilltop Foundation, the underlying landowner of the Girl Scout camp, which is located here. The street vacation comes out of security concerns. We essentially have two property owners at the end of the street. You have the Girl Scout camp and Jonathan Henning and Paige Duncan that live at the end. The street is not built to city standards, does not have standard lighting, and what we're having is a lot of vagrants hanging out in that area. We're having a lot of cars being parked there and doing some unruly things that maybe shouldn't be happening. And so the security reasons for the Girl Scout camp and also from the Duncans wanted to vacate the street so that they could put in a cul-de-sac, a street standard cul-de-sac, which would be placed right there. And then they could put in a gate across that point. The gate will be accessible for the Girl Scouts and for the Duncans. Mind you, the Girl Scouts only use that for ADA access. Their main parking lot is located off Morton Street, and then they have a lovely walk up to the Girl Scout camp.
Thank you for that clarification. I do know that roadway and the Girl Scouts do use it for maintenance and service of the building, yes. So it is much more convenient, I believe, to drive a maintenance vehicle up instead of hauling maintenance equipment.
Very much so.
Down the path. I should have recused myself, I'm sure. I'm a Girl Scout. I'm a Girl Scout.
No. Oh, no. Well,
other questions, or Dan, did you have any other comments?
In truth, I bought Girl Scout cookies for myself.
Oh, okay. I did. Thank you.
And Tim, did you have any other thoughts? Basically, it's for security and safety, and the Duncans would have access to the gate as well as the Girl Scout maintenance crew. Yep. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Okay, let's move on.
All right, I'll call items 5I, J, and K. They are annexation 19006, application of Hoy Prairie South LLC to annex approximately 9.30 acres change of zone 19015 for a change from AG agricultural to R3 residential, and approving a conditional annexation agreement with Hoy Prairie for property generally located at South 33rd and Rokeby Road.
Good evening, welcome.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. My name is Deborah Hoy, and I am the owner and developer of what is now called Reunion Ridge. What is Reunion Ridge? It is 9.34 acres of residential development set in the middle of my farm, which has been in my family since the 1890s. As you can see, there are 15 lots, and there's a community area in the center. All of the houses in this development face the community center. So the backs of the houses will be along the outside road. The lots will be individually owned, and the homes will be designed and built by the individuals that purchase the lots. This is what is called an intentional community. It's being designed and built for people in transition, generally people that are moving from the first half of their lives to the third quarter of their lives. And the company that will actually do this, my company, is called Third Quarter Development. What this is not a retirement community. It's a community where individuals living there will commit to helping each other and will commit to being an active, willing member of the community. Research says we grow old better if we grow old with peers, and that's what this is designed to do. I dreamed this community up when I was trying to decide how to spend the third quarter of my life, and there were 3 goals that I identified. One was to pay homage to my family farm. One was to stay on the farm for as long as I could. And the third was I didn't want to grow old alone. I wanted to live in a community. The only way I could figure out how to reach those 3 goals was if I designed and built this community myself on land that I own. This community is unique to the city of Lincoln. It's more than a lot layout and the architecture. My goal is to build a community of people who are diverse, active, and committed to helping their neighbors, to allow us all to live independently longer without being a burden on our family. Membership on teams will be required, and right now I've got ideas for outdoor maintenance, indoor maintenance, errand committee, food and fun. The communal area will support activity, it'll support serenity, and it'll support food sharing. My goal, and this is another unique aspect of development, my goal is only to recapture my costs with regard to this development. If I can come close to that, I'll be happy. I want to, one other, this is simply an architectural rendering of what a home might look like on this property. The theme is contemporary country, so we won't have 3-story Gothic mansions, but we'll have a variety of home designs. Other items, it'll be pet friendly, it's going to be green, it's going to be organic, it's going to be highly energy efficient. I hope to have a community center, which we're going to call the barn, to stick with the rural nature of the development. I want a dog run. We'll have a community garden in the exterior space, not in the communal area, but in the exterior space that's allocated. And another unique aspect of this is that residents will have access to the rest of my farm, which is approximately 20 acres of prairie and old pasture land, some of which has never been tilled. This development did receive unanimous approval on the consent calendar from the Planning Commission. I appreciate very much your consideration of my application for annexation and rezoning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Hoy? I was curious, Ms. Hoy, could you put the drawing up showing the development again? And I'm having a hard time. Where are the roads in and around? And
this road comes in from the Iron Ridge development, which abuts my property. This road is a public street. Reunion Road will be a public street. They're yet to be built. I own the 40 acres that's to the north of this development, which is in the process of being sold, and a development plan will be before you, I'm sure, in the near future for that. So there'll be public street access here as well as here that will come off of Rokeby Road. This is approximately 3/10 of a mile north of Rokeby Road, back in the field.
But I guess, are there roads around the development too?
Yes.
Okay, maybe I can't see that.
North or south of Rokeby?
Okay.
Nate Burnett, Rig Engineering. We have Morit Street to the west, Gretna to the west as well, and then so we'll be connecting to those as well from the west. So here's more of an overall view. Rokabee's here on the north, and then our site will be connecting to existing infrastructure on the west, and then hopefully as well to the north.
Okay. I guess I'm confused. Within that development, are there roads that, like, right in front of the homes, or where is the road?
The roads will be to the back of the homes.
Here's the development. So
okay.
as Deb said, there'll be public streets on the north and the west.
I see it now.
And then a private drive on the south.
And east.
Okay. Thank you very much. I was concerned about emergency vehicles on how they're going to access.
So,
yes,
thank
Benny.
you, Madam Chair. So I pulled up a Google map because I was having trouble finding 33rd and Rokeby Road. It doesn't exist, right?
Approximately.
Okay. But it comes in on 31st and goes down into the development to the west. And then you'll come off of Gretna, was it Abbotsford or Morit, right?
Morit.
Yeah. And this is all south of Rokeby Road?
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to understand the concept a little bit more, so it's the model would be you sell the homes, the lots to people who are independent, in terms of independent living. I mean, there's no skilled care, no, nothing. I mean, I have to be able to take care of myself.
The third quarter development name represents people that are in the third quarter of their lives who are able to live independently. My hope is that this development, with the neighbor and community commitment to help neighbors, will allow people to live independently longer. But when you get to that fourth quarter, it'll be time to move on. There won't be services here to provide for that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I guess one final question. Will the owners be required to sell? Is that the process or understanding?
They'll be able to sell when they are ready to move on to the fourth quarter, or if they're interested in moving after they build a house there and they don't want to live there any longer, yes.
So is there an age restriction?
No.
Like you have to, okay.
It's for people in transition, and in my mind, that can be people that are maybe new empty nesters, people that are thinking about retirement, pondering whether they want to go into a retirement community or move to another house. The whole part of this is to allow people who are transitioning to build their home and age in place. That's the goal.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item?
Hi, I'm Charlie Humble, Erickson Cedarstrom, 301 South 13th Street, Suite 400. I'm appearing for this, and I do represent Ms. Hoy. And something we are, as she alluded to, we are working with other property owners in the area. And something came up on Friday, kind of out of the blue. And so what we need to do is to work with them and fix an issue, a glitch that came up. We don't expect it to be anything other than temporary. As soon as I found out about it, I talked to Jeff on Friday, and of course the notice had already been given for the public hearing today, so we decided it'd be better to go ahead with that. We would ask that you put this on pending, and we would not need another a public hearing. This would suffice, and we'll get things worked out and be back with the same type of development, the same development as you have before you now, so.
And Roy?
Mr. Humble, are we talking about pending no date certain or date certain?
Well, because you never know. We're supposed to take about 3 to 4 weeks to work this out, but I hate to yo-yo back and forth. So I guess it would be a date uncertain, but as soon as we know something, we'll put it on your agenda and finish it up, if that's acceptable. And also, I mentioned in talking to Jeff this afternoon, he said that you could vote on this today.
Yes.
Putting it on pending today.
I move that we place these 3 items on pending no date certain at the request of the applicant.
Second.
And seconded
Yay.
by Washington?
Yep.
And without public hearing.
And without public hearing. Okay. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Are you willing to let us know what the issue is that's causing this to move to pending, no date certain?
At this point, it's a private
Okay.
agreement,
I don't wanna
and
know.
so it really doesn't affect this, and so,
We're okay.
All right.
I guess I'd rather not.
Just curiosity.
Sure, no, understood, fully understood.
All right, thank you very much. Teresa, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Thank you very much. And we're on to, I guess, our
5L.
Last 4?
last 4.
5L through O.
Items 5L, M, N, and O. This is the Campion redevelopment agreement between M Street Development and the city relating to the redevelopment of property located at 322 South 9th Street, 324 South 9th Street, 315 South 10th, 900 L Street, and 927 M Street, and associated rights-of-way on 9th, 10th, L, and M. Amending the fiscal year CIP to authorize and appropriate $5.5 million in TIF funds for the redevelopment, authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the redevelopment in the amount of $5.5 million, and Street and Alley Vacation 19006 to vacate the north 142 feet of the alley adjacent to the property generally located between 9th and 10th Streets and M and L Streets.
Good evening again. Dan Marvin, Urban Development. And what you have before you, 4 different items. The first one, I put the map up here to identify an area looking down. The properties that we're talking about would be this L-shaped building, this building, this building, this vacant area, the alley, a smaller building here, and then a gravel lot. Those properties would be acquired, and this is what the redevelopment area covers. On October 28th of last year, we did a plan amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan and took it to the Planning Commission in this body, and we were forwarded ahead with a 6-0 vote. Just to kind of zoom in on the properties that we're talking about, this is the picture of the L-shaped building, the building next door, the red 9, which I remember it as P.O. Pears.
So say we all.
And then from across the street, let's see, we'll zoom out a little bit. This is the alleyway. This is the Arter property. Here's a look down the alley. This is across the street into the gravel lot. You notice there's a driveway here. And then this is down 10th Street. There's some curb cuts here as well. So this is the area that we're talking about, really close to the city-county building. And what is being proposed is this building. Campion's proposing a 7-story, 340,000 square foot student housing project. On the exterior, which we'll zoom in on a couple of these, there would be row houses along the first floor. Here's kind of this is a view on M Street. Here's be an example of a row house. One of the things that we've insisted on previous redevelopment agreements is to try to create things that are active. Generally, that has meant retail, but what we found in the age of Amazon, retail is a challenge. So we think this is a great alternative to create row houses along the streetscape, and this would do, that's accomplished the same goal. This would be a look down 10th Street. So in general, I think that the aesthetics of the whole area is going to be improved dramatically. Will create a higher and better use in this area. This has been taken, this particular building design was taken to Urban Design. Urban Design approved the proposal on a 6-0 vote. The cost of this project is about $37.5 million, and it generates $5.5 million of tax increment financing. The TIF schedule that's in your package, a couple of the highlights. It generates $72,500 in TIF administration fees. We're over the limit, so the amount of those dollars would likely roll into an affordable housing fund. The $500,000 city public improvements, that's to develop sidewalk improvements north of this project up to O Street. There is some streetscape work around the area of about $500,000. There's an old sanitary sewer line that's going to be replaced. And then there's facade and other improvements on the property as well. With me today is David Levy and Brian Grubb, and I think they'd like to speak a little bit, and then we'd be open to a public hearing, and I certainly can come back up for questions as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, council members. David Levy, 1700 Farnham Street, and with me on behalf of the developer, and with me is Brian Grubb with Campion. I was going to hit a few highlights, but given the hour, I will refrain from that. I think Mr. Marvin did hit the highlights of the project. We feel like it's a great project. It's been through a lot of levels of review and met with favorable consideration really throughout. So with that, we also have with us Alex Des Hotels, the architect. With Grace Aber, we have Nate Burnett with Riga Engineering and Steve Grease with NAA and P Dodge here with us as well today. So with that, I will stop, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions, James?
I have some questions. I don't know, can you speak on the business model of the units going in? Like, are they going to lease with students individually, or how does that work?
Sure, and Brian may be better to answer that. Although I do want to bring up one point. There are 24 units on the first and second floor, almost 20% of the total units in the building that are more of a townhome model, if you will, and are independently accessible either from the street or internally separately from the 3rd through 7th levels. And those are really targeted toward graduate students or even young professionals who might want to live in that kind of, again, those are generally 4-bedroom, some are 2-bedroom, some are 1-bedroom. Those are geared a little bit toward a graduate student or a young professional. But otherwise, Brian, you want to fill in the rest of there with the plan?
Happy to do so. Brian Grubb with Campion Development, 6011 Walden Place, Mandeville, Louisiana, 70448. Yes, there would be individual leases with students.
And how much is the rent going to be? Is it for students and each of them have a bedroom? And
that's correct.
Walk me through that a little bit.
We've got a mixture of single bedroom up to 4-bedroom units. So rents would vary from, I believe, $650 on the low end to $1,000, and that's a per bed. type of situation. So for a 4-bedroom, it'd be $650 per bed. Single bed would be $1,050.
Do you know if the other private student housing units are currently filled up? I think I looked at the university's numbers, and I think the university's housing is currently filled about 85%.
Sure.
Do you know if...
Actually, I've got the numbers.
You got the...
I do. So here, thanks to Steve Grease, I want to give him credit, but I do have the numbers here, so I'll share those with you. 50/50, I want to get you a date on this. This is 2019. The 50/50 project, 99.3% occupied. 8 N-Lofts, 95.8% occupied. Academy, 96.5% occupied. Latitude, 94.1. Park House, 91.1. Prime Place, 100%. And in total, or overall, that's a 96.1% occupancy rate. Some of those projects, a number of those projects are bigger than this project. Some are smaller, some are about the same size, but it's a pretty good sample size. And again, those are 96% occupied.
Would you email me those numbers?
Sure.
Awesome. So the monthly rent's going to be anywhere from $650 to $1,000. It's based on per beds, and then there's going to be like a shared living room?
Yes.
Okay. As Lincoln continues to turn into like an aging population, is there any kind of backup plans for this property if it's not filled anywhere to capacity? Or, I mean, like, is there anything that this could be like repurposed into if student housing doesn't work out, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, certainly student housing is our primary focus at this point in time. Anything is convertible and can be converted. As David indicated, and as the way the building is built, the first 2 floors can essentially be isolated from the top floors. The first 2 floors could be used for workforce housing or some other type of manner, but you know, it easily could be converted at some point in time in the future to an alternative use for other type of housing.
Like, I had a hard time trying to find that online, right? Like, I tried to Google around and try to see what these units could get turned into if these were not used for student housing. So, I mean, like, can you kind of I mean, I can't imagine that they would turn into, like, families renting these out, right? Like,
it might not. It would be single professionals, young professionals. It really depends on what the needs might be. I mean, it's kind of hard to project in the future based upon a design that's contemplated for a specific purpose right now. It certainly would have to go through a renovation process, but it's not something that we'd be unwilling to look at.
Okay. One of the concerns that I also saw was that new student housing plays a part in increasing rent downtown. Do you know anything about that? Can you share any information on that or address it?
I don't know that I've heard that. I mean, I think, you know, these rents, and again, I'll give you some of the market data here, but the rents that Brian described per bedroom are pretty consistent across these projects. Again, some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. You know, I can tell you just sort of anecdotally with a son who's a freshman at UNL living in the dorms, these are very comparable in terms of rents to what you pay in that kind of situation. So I don't know that they would overall increase rents downtown. You know, perhaps. I mean, this is a $40, $45, $50 million investment in downtown. It will increase the assessed valuation of this property by over $27 million. So, you know, in theory, it will have a positive impact economically downtown. Will it have a broad impact in increasing rents wholesale in a noticeable way? I've not seen any evidence of that.
One of the other concerns that I had, or that I had heard from it, so since this is being marketed as private student housing, is there any plans to have any sort of like RA on the units like they have in university student housing, or is this going to be like devoid of any of that student support that other student housing has?
You will certainly we'll have a third-party management company that comes in and runs the operation, so that will be staffed accordingly based upon need. I don't know if you're going to have the typical type of RA, but you would have, you know, essentially a full staff supporting this development at all times.
So in other places that this has been built at and been developed, do you find that students go in with the expectation that they have the same support that university housing provides them?
In what capacity?
Well, I mean, like if someone has a problem with their roommate or someone has problems with...
Yes. That's all addressed through the management company. So, I mean, it readily available on-site 24/7.
Okay. And how do you vet the person who becomes the RA essentially for this private student housing?
That is through the management company. Again, I mean, that's outsourced. We have engaged a particular company in Lafayette, Louisiana, our last project, that went through a rigorous process of evaluations, selection criteria, vetted them, made sure that they'd meshed with the environment, with the community. We would do the same process here. We would ensure that whatever management company came in, staffed it with individuals that were appropriate, that could integrate within the environment and the community, make themselves available, and address any community concerns.
How long are your leases with the student? Is it month to month? Is it semester to semester, or a year-long lease?
It would be a year.
One of the concerns that I also have then is students who experience a disruption in their financial aid, because I believe that's how the majority of these students are going to be paying for these units, is through financial aid that they're receiving, student loans or Pell Grants or whatever, right? If they have a disruption in their financial aid, is there an option for them to back out of the lease then?
I can't speak to that at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Benny?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, Mr. Grubb, Mr. Levy, thank you, Mr. Levy.
You got it. It's okay, either way.
Thank you. No, someone who gets their name. Yeah. Thank you both for coming forward, and thank you for your investment in our community, your desire to invest in our community. I think this is a wonderful community, and I'm excited to see people see that. I do have a few questions, though. Student housing, and Councilman Bowers addressed some of them. Would non-students be accepted in this situation if I was just a professional and there were 3 other students in one of those quads? Or would the application screen somebody like that out?
Certainly it would be.
Okay. I've heard some discussion with people in the community about the quality or the longevity of the building. Is that something we should really be concerned about? Was this something that has 50, 60-year lifespan for the building? Or?
Certainly, and obviously we've got our architect and our local engineer here as well. That's we've worked with extensively on this job. First and foremost, we would comply with all the applicable building codes in the city of Lincoln. And you're looking at the first 2 floors being concrete, brick and mortar, and glass, and the rest would be cementitious board. So that's going to be, there'd be little abuse because you're 20 feet above grade when you would hit that board. So with respect to maintenance, it's relatively low key. Would go through normal maintenance repair, as well as painting every 5 to 10 years as needed. But with respect to quality and integrity, I don't think anyone has any concerns, nor the contractors that we've talked to locally about building this building and it being sustainable.
And you kind of touched on my next question. You're based in Louisiana.
That's right.
And I think you have some experience in building. A gentleman that was here earlier. Would you bring in your own contractors and laborers from out of state, or would you use local labor?
Absolutely not. I want to thank you, first and foremost, as well as the administration. For the past 18 months, we have worked diligently and tirelessly with the staff here, and it has been an extreme pleasure. We have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know the city, getting to know the individuals, getting to know what makes Lincoln, Lincoln, and we appreciate that, and we respect that. And with every development we do, we invest in the community. We are not a contractor that comes in and brings our own forces and leaves. This is a Lincoln project to be built with Lincoln general contractors, Lincoln tradesmen, Lincoln suppliers. We intend on doing job reach and outreach fairs. We've interviewed 3 local general contractors who are very well respected within the community. We intend on, subject to approval of this project, engaging one of them. Obviously, Nate Burnett with Riga Engineering has been working tirelessly with us, and our architect, Steve Grease, is our local realtor. We are hoping to be considered as part of Lincoln in the future.
My final question, Mr. Chair. We, like many communities across the nation, are facing housing issues. And it would be nice if you'd build just regular residential housing. Was there a plan at any point to maybe consider that as opposed to student housing?
Actually, there was. Prior administration, we had discussed with them developing an affordable housing site. It was on a nearby property. That site never came to fruition, never was available, but we've got renderings of what that would look like. We intended on doing it initially on a parallel path. Unfortunately, this property is available. This is what we can proceed with at this point in time, but we'd be open to many, many discussions and look forward to the opportunity to have at least a first glance at some type of that in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Sandra?
I have a clarifying question on the townhomes.
Sure.
You said that they could be for young professionals or graduate students, and I'm wanting to know, are you going to use the same business model and leasing individual bedrooms in the townhomes as well?
It would be, yes. Townhomes, flats, they're the same concept,
Okay.
same design, yes.
Okay, and then what is the life expectancy of the building? What's the life cycle you're working on?
40?
40?
40.
Nowadays, 40-year building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got,
With regular maintenance, it will last longer than that.
Right.
You know, and I would say on that point too, I mean,
you got to retrofit.
a building like anything, the economic benefit, you spend all the money up front, the economic benefit is the rents over time.
Right.
To build a $45 or $50 million building that only has a 15-year life expectancy, I suspect you would not find a bank that would give you a loan on that.
That's right.
Yeah, did you consider building this with green standards, and if so, had you considered LEED? And if so, LEED, what's the goal you have set?
Certainly, we looked at LEED, as I think anyone can appreciate it. It's extremely costly, and unfortunately, it did not work out in this instance. Well, our concept is smart living, and that's what Campion is all about. It is about taking living to the next step. So you will have as much electronic capabilities as possible, Alexas, digital keypads and boards. Everyone would have an individual key to their room for security purposes, but generally you would access things electronically. So with respect to your particular question, while it might not be LEED certified or LEED designed, we would incorporate as much green as we could.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have the concept of the row houses. It sounds like most likely it'll be for student housing still compared to the ones above it. Is there going to be like a buffer of the row houses? Is it going to be built as a quieter space?
I don't think there's any difference in the acoustics. The row houses do, and David, you might be able to point it out on here.
Yeah, so
They do have
there is
patios.
a kind of a concrete deck here. So if you think about it vertically, and at some level, this is sort of two buildings. You got the first two floors with the row houses, townhomes, whatever you might call them, you know, the kind of the concrete deck, and then you have more of the apartment aspect of it above. So there is some difference there, some differentiation.
And so the business model shows that there's still an unfulfilled need in our community for more student housing.
It did 18 months ago, and it still does today.
Okay, because
Yes,
I know that might be a dumb question because you wouldn't be investing in something like this.
But it's a fair question.
Yes, it had to be asked.
Yes, certainly.
So tell me a little bit about the landscaping plan for that entire block. Granted, I'll be the first to agree, it's not the prettiest block in town as it is now, but
We hope to expand upon that and improve it.
with the tax increment financing, you know, there's some expectations on streetscape improvements, enhancements, not only architecturally, but also with some greenery.
Absolutely, and these are all part of the redevelopment agreement as well as exhibits. Obviously, with the townhomes or flats, as you might refer to them, you will have patios that will generate some outdoor space for people to have some outdoor living on the street. You're also going to have greenery, trees, and other sidewalk improvements that will be incorporated into this job.
Is it on all four sides?
I believe so.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is a schematic of that. I really probably should have left the picture up there that we had, because I think this probably shows it better in context. And as Mr. Marvin mentioned also, as part of the TIF proceeds, the streetscape improvements will go all the way north to O Street on 9th and 10th. So it'll make a big difference in that corridor, not just on the project site.
And so can you talk a little bit about parking? Where will all these people be parking?
So currently, as designed, parking is not required per the zone. Nonetheless, we recognize that it's an extreme concern for a lot of people, and particularly probably students that are, in their third and fourth year. We've got on-site, I believe, 143 parking spaces right now. We are exploring options for additional parking subsurface. Obviously, that would have to take some additional engineering and design and construction, so we're looking at that. But we currently have 143 spaces on-site for cars, as well as some additional spaces for motorized vehicles, like motorcycles, scooters, et cetera.
There will also be a free shuttle available to the residents, in addition to taking residents to the university and other places. It will take them to parking. So, there are parking lots around downtown, surface parking lots, probably farther from this than you might want to walk in January, but you could lease a space in those parking lots, fairly reasonably in terms of price, and that shuttle would take you there to your car when you needed it.
That's right. If we can utilize any existing parking within the city and ensure that our students get there from point A to point B safely, we're happy to do that.
So I'm noticing on the application, it said 14 townhomes, but you've changed it to 24, correct?
It's the first 2 floors. If you look, the first floor has got 14, the second floor has got 10, so that's 14 total.
So
Or
24 total.
24
The
total.
application only referred to the first floor.
Yes.
And then how many other units?
It'll be 575 beds.
It's 134 units, so that'd be 110 third through seventh floor apartments.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
You said 110 units, so how many beds does that come out to again? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Total of 575 beds.
575 beds.
Across all 134 units.
Okay. You'll send me your market data, right?
I will,
And
yep.
then would you also send me an outline of your student support services that you offer for university students? Because I'd like to review that. I think that's the last question I had.
Actually, David, if you want to send that to me, then I can disseminate it to all the council members.
Perfect. You beat me to it. I will do that. Thank you.
And then how does this property compare to some of the other ones? It seems like each property is trying to one-up the other on the type of amenities they offer to their future residents.
Dog park, pool, outdoor living, outdoor space. Again, smart living is our concept. We want smart students. We want students who are serious about school, and we're going to take good care of them. That's what we do in our other communities, our other projects, and that's what we'd like to implement here.
How long do students stay with you? Do you typically have students who stay all 4 years? Is it typically 2 years? Walk me through kind of like the life cycle of how long a student stays in one of your units.
I think that also depends on the local, what you're dealing with here. I mean, you would hope that you would get a student in their sophomore year and stay with you through maybe graduate school. I don't know if that's always the case, and I can't really speculate as to what would happen generally. You know,
Okay.
I mean, typically, if you provide a great experience, the easiest thing to do is nothing. Once you move in, you don't move out until you have to.
Okay.
Okay, Benny.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No,
I'll do this.
it's okay.
Mr. Grubb, thank you. That kind of, how many other cities have you done this before?
Yes.
And where,
Yeah,
and
yes,
how much?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the last project, which was completed, substantially complete now, is Lafayette, Louisiana. That was one project. My partners, Paul and Paige Prechter, who unfortunately could not be present here today, have done it up and down the East Coast as well as Florida. So we're talking South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. We've currently got other multifamily properties underway. I personally have served as counsel to numerous public entities back in Louisiana, doing hospitals, airports, hotels, my gosh, the Superdome right now, having dealt with the same management company that deals with Pinnacle Arena. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, Madam Chair, that's Britta. Just a comment. I know, here we go.
We're gonna be here all night.
How long can you stay tonight? No,
We're here till tomorrow at 6 a.m., but I can stay longer if needed.
Just a comment, and thank you for being here from,
Yes,
welcome
thank
to
you.
Lincoln from Louisiana. I would be remiss not to thank your peers. I serve on the Downtown Lincoln Association Board, and we had a terrific briefing a couple of weeks ago, thanks to Todd Ogden in the room, who serves as the director of the DLA. So I just wanted to say thank you for that presentation from your peers, and David was there as well, Mr. Levy. So that certainly lifted a lot of some fog for me, and I know Mr. Marvin and his staff were there as well. So thank you for that, and I know the questions that were raised today were raised during that briefing as well. So thank you for being here, and thank you for trying Lincoln.
We certainly appreciate it, and we thank you all.
Would you also send, I'm just, for my own curiosity, send me a copy of the lease that you signed with students?
I'll check into that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you both very much for
Thank you.
coming down. Thank you for coming to Lincoln.
Thank
We
you.
do appreciate that. Now, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on these items? Mr. Marvin, did you need a rebuttal or anything like that?
Pat would like
Pat.
to speak.
I'm Pat Schurz. The only thing that I have a problem with this development is I don't object to the development, but but I would like to, people that are bringing program develops forward, especially for students that use, some of the time use the buses. How about trying to encourage them to use the city transit as well? Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Pat.
thank you very much. Is there anyone else?
You don't need to sign in, Pat. We know who you are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item?
Richard Howerson, 6311 Inverness Road. I don't know if this is a good thing or not. Well, there's a market there, but I started doing the figures, and we're talking like $7,800 a year for rent, and that doesn't even include food.
Ramen noodles.
Some kid goes to school, 4 or 5 years, gets a degree in political science, gets out, and all of a sudden decides, guess what? They're running out of high-dollar jobs with a degree in political science. And maybe that's why we have kids now saying, hey, I can't buy a car because I got my student loan debt. Although that's, again, nobody's forcing the kids to go these places, but I think I can see what attractions there, because they got gyms, they got pools, they got weight rooms, they got outdoor grilling. So it's a draw, and I imagine if you're a young kid and you really don't think, I'm not paying for this, student loans are paying for it. And it might be tempted, rather than go to the university with a meal plan and all that, do this and order pizza every night. But my main concern is, I figure like $7,800 a year just for rent. Although again, we're not forcing them to stay there, but I read those figures. I thought, well, no wonder people are graduating with. You can't pay for that with a part-time job. But my main concern is the TIF. I thought, why don't we just back an armored truck up to their company headquarters and shovel money out the back? Well, that's a pretty good visual. It's actually a payos to what amount we're giving them, $5 million. And again, I think it's supposed to be given if it won't get done without the TIF. But you can tell from they've done their research that all these other facilities are almost full. So they're going to do this. There's no doubt in my mind, and you're going to approve the TIF. There's not much more dying there, but they would do this with or without the TIF. So I would say you can approve the project, but I would like to see the TIF turned down. And actually, I think the only way to put a rein on TIF is to file a lawsuit against one of these projects. I think that would be the only way to put a rein on it. Again, like I say, the project itself looks like a good project. Again, it's and the market's there. They've already proved that by the research. Again, my objection is the TIF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Then we can move on.
All right, that concludes our public hearing. Our resolutions on first reading are items 6A through J. Ordinances first reading are items 7A through G. Our pending list are items 8A and B.
Madam Chair, I'd like to say, remember the golden rule, and I move adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ward. Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes. Yes, it's not working. There we are. Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes, and I do want to say thank you to Councilman Schob for stepping in. And we are adjourned.
Yay.